Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Intermission in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 1, Winter I. 31, December, 999. Sasuke is awoken by a hard thwack to his forehead and Tsunade's voice, "Alright, up, and at M, kiddo." Sasuke scrubs at his eyes and scans his surroundings. Apparently his intention of resting his eyes for a minute or two in the on-call room had turned into a 1-hour nap in the world's most uncomfortable chair. Tsunade's presence hasn't woken the resident snoring in one of the cots, but if Sasuke's time in the hospital as a patient and basically an intern has taught him anything, it's that once a resident has actually managed to get to sleep, they can't be woken up for anything but the direst of emergencies. Tsunade takes another moment to peer down at Sasuke with an arched brow before grabbing him by the collar and heaving him to his feet. Sasuke lets out a choked yelp and bats her hands away. "Stop doing that. I'm already up, what's going on?" Tsunade doesn't break her stride, strolling out of the on-call room as she replies, "First, like I've said, stop wearing collars that big and I'll stop using them as a handle. Second, what's going on is that it's 11 and you're here. Come on, if we're making it to the Naka shrine before midnight we're gonna have to hustle." Sasuke's brow furrows. "What's at the shrine?" Tsunade shoots him a look, 1 part weary, 2 parts unimpressed. "It's more like what isn't at the shrine. There's too many damn people visiting the Shrine of Six Paths for New Year's, so we're hitting up your neck of the woods." Sasuke blinks, slowly and deliberately, as they cross the threshold of the hospital and head out into the cold of the night. Is it New Year's? Winter solstice was 2 weeks ago, so it would have to be, but Sasuke has been in the hospital since yesterday and hasn't had to write the date on anything for even longer, so he really couldn't say. Sasuke runs a hand through his hair and mutters, "What do people even do on New Year's?" Tsunade smirks, "Yeah, I feel that. Only reason I remember is because Shizune started dragging me to the shrine every year once she was strong enough to actually lift my drunk ass." Sasuke hides the smirk that image brings to his face behind his collar. He doesn't have to hide it for long. Tsunade's quick pace brings them to the ruins of the Uchiha district in slightly less than a half hour. Sasuke stumbles to a halt at the threshold. A million excuses and protests that had been nebulously forming in his brain as Tsunade swept him along suddenly come together in a lightning strike as Sasuke's stomach does a somersault. His hands and feet go cold and numb. Every breath feels like he has to drag it in, then shove it out again. I don't. The last time he actually passed through the gate was 5 years ago, next to the last Hokage. Sasuke had frozen in his tracks back then, too. Sarutobi had tried to put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder to steady him, but Sasuke had shoved it off. He'd glanced up to see more of that pity, no, not pity, guilt, but why, in his eyes. The jolt of frustration had given him energy enough to throw himself forward and into the closed crime scene that was his home. "I don't see there's no point in celebrating, alright? I haven't." Sasuke had kept his head down so he wouldn't have to see the shuttered shops and boarded up homes. He'd bit down hard on his lip to stifle the impulse to say "I'm home" when coming through his own front door. He'd kept his sandals stubbornly on as he took the long way to his room, telling himself that this wasn't a house anymore, nobody lived here, nobody was going to care. "You can do whatever you want, I'm." He'd stormed past Ataka's room, his parents' room, and almost missed his own. He'd shoved only his clothes and his ninja tools into the 2 big duffel bag the village had provided for him. He'd considered bringing some of his books, or maybe one of the pictures in the living room, but quickly tamped down the ache that brought to his throat. He didn't need them. Those books weren't anything useful, there was nothing in them that would help him kill Ataka. Looking at those pictures would just make him soft and sad, and that kind of grief doesn't accomplish anything. It just makes everything rot. In the present, Tsunade's arm comes around his shoulders and pulls him tight to her side. Sasuke flinches, mind telling him to pull away from the person touching him without permission, but body leaning into the warmth. He looks up. There's no pity, no guilt in the eyes of the 5th Hokage. Tsunade remarks, voice soft, "You know, one of the reasons I didn't want to be Hokage was the house. Sure, the Senju had our own clan compound and I had my own place once I was grown, but between Grandpa, my great-uncle, and Sarutobi-sensei, that house is where I grew up. If the thought of walking through that door and remembering all the time I spent chasing Noeki around the dinner table was enough to make me sick, there was no way I could handle being Hokage. Tsunade squeezes his shoulder. If you really can't tonight, we won't. We'll pack in with the Hyuga at their shrine or just skip the whole thing and stuff ourselves with soba at the house. But New Year's is a time for starting fresh. I can't think of a better time than now to give that a shot. Sasuke closes his eyes. He can't remember his last New Year's with his family, not in any detail. He remembers the Naka Shrine's bell ringing, 107 times before midnight and 1 time after. He remembers the taste of amazake, though he doesn't remember what cousin snuck him a sip of the alcoholic kind. He thinks he remembers his mother telling him to not run too far, but he was always running off. It could have been from that New Year's or so many others. Grief makes everything rot. Even memories. Sasuke lets out a long, shuddering sigh. Yeah. Let's go. Tsunade shoots him a smile and leads them along, expertly shifting the subject. Apparently half the reason everyone's all over the sage's shrine this year is because it's the turn of the millennium. People are expecting the moon to fall on us or the sun to go dark. Sasuke focuses on pooling fire chakra in the soles of his feet to melt the snow around them so he won't look at the buildings. That's ridiculous. You're telling me, but people always get antsy about auspicious numbers, Tsunade snorts, especially when all the doomsday cults out there start throwing their hats into the ring. Nobody loves a special number more than a doomsday cult. Anything from the Sage of Six Paths returning to judge the wicked to Jashin swallowing the innocent. If it could happen, it will happen on the turn of the decade, century, millennium, etc. Sasuke's nose wrinkles in a frown as he avoids looking at the police station standing silent vigil over the scene of the crime. Are doomsday cults that big of a problem? Tsunade shrugs. Around here, not really. But their voices carry, and they wiggle their way into the ears of scared and desperate people. After Orochimaru made this hidden village feel a lot less hidden and a lot less safe, we've got a few more of those kicking around. They're like weeds. If you're not diligent about keeping them out of your garden, you'll suddenly find they've taken the whole thing over. The district thins out the closer they get to the river, houses getting smaller and trees getting taller. The Naka Shrine is closer to how Sasuke remembers it than any other building. Nobody had been here the night of the massacre. If anyone's stolen coins from the offering box, it's only been some enterprising crows. The wear and tear on the building comes only from having been left to its own devices for 5 years. The Naka River has frozen over. There's no using that water to purify themselves today. Not unless they want to get frostbite. Tsunade purses her lips as they ascend the steps, passing under the Torii gate on the right side. Remind me what kami this was dedicated to. Nakano, the dragon of the southern river, Sasuke murmurs. He's probably left by now. They make it up to the bell and Tsunade checks her watch 10 till midnight. She lets go of Sasuke and stretches. All right, let's get to it. Keep count for me. Dust and cobwebs come off the bell in a shower as Tsunade rings it the first 10 times. Sasuke tries to shield his face and mouth, but his eyes water and he coughs up a lung all the same. Tsunade collapses into helpless peals of laughter and Sasuke glares at her, hoping for a spiteful second that a spider will fall into her hair. She keeps ringing the bell, and as Sasuke keeps count he starts clearing the sando of snow with bursts of fire chakra from the soles of his feet. By the time Tsunade reaches 106 rings of the bell, the path is clear for anyone who wants to leave offerings. Nobody will. But better that they have the option and choose not to instead of not being able to at all. Tsunade rings the bell for the 107th time at 11:59. She holds the rope out to Sasuke with an expectant quirk to her lips. Sasuke's eyebrows slowly arch, his eyes going wide. Well? Come on, this is your patron kami, kiddo, Tsunade remarks, one hand on her hip. If anyone should ring him into the new year, it's an Uchiha. Sasuke frowns, taking the rope almost on instinct. Like I said, he's probably gone. Nobody's tended this shrine in 5 years. Tsunade just glances over to the river. Sure, maybe he's not in the shrine anymore. But the river's still flowing. He'll hear you. Sasuke purses his lips, his grip tensing on the rope. He closes eyes and counts down from 5. Tsunade's watch ticks to midnight and Sasuke rings the bell. There's a loud crack from the sheet of ice over the river. Suzuki can suddenly hear the rushing water through the crack in the ice. It sounds almost like the purring of a great cat. Tsunade's eyebrows have shot up, her eyes wide. She lets out a low whistle before grinning down at him. Congratulations on the new year, Suzuki. It takes Suzuki a few tries, but he finally replies, congratulations on the new year, ma'am. Tsunade reaches out and ruffles his hair with one hand. With the other, she withdraws a hefty bottle of amazake from her winter coat. Suzuki blinks in surprise at the bottle's sudden appearance. Where she hid that? Nope, never mind. None of his business, especially where his mentor is concerned. Tsunade hands him the bottle as she sets about pulling out a pair of sake cups. Warm this up, kid. Amazake is not worth shit cold. Suzuki channels fire chakra into the palms of his hands. Is this the alcoholic kind? Tsunade smirks down at him. What do you think? That Shizun would crucify you if she smelled any alcohol on my breath, and she has a better nose than Taunton, Suzuki deadpants, pouring the newly warm drink into the little cups. Got it in one, kiddo. Tsunade lifts her cup, to the new millennium. Suzuki clinks his cup against hers, to the new millennium. Tsunade will drag him back to the Hokage's residence before too long. They'll slurp up Shizun's Toshikoshi soba and listen to her vent about the crowds at the Shrine of Six Paths nearly trampling poor little Taunton. Shizun will set him up in one of the rooms for the Hokage's family, insisting it's much too cold for him to walk all the way back to Kakashi's apartment, especially since Kakashi is off on a mission and he'll be there all alone. Suzuki will stay up reading Tsunade's medical journals with Taunton curled up at his feet, watching the lights in the village go out from the corner of his eye. But for now, Tsunade and Suzuki sit on the steps of the Naka Shrine, drinking the sweet amazake, listening to the contented rumblings of the Naka River, and drawing the first moments of the new year out for as long as they'll last. 10. January, 1000. When you've been trapped in various and sundry glass tubes underground for a year, you quickly learn to hone in on literally any interesting or different thing you see outside them. New faces are of particular interest. And new, pretty faces? Well, that's the jackpot. Suijutsu watches the girl with the pink hair collect Kabuto's research notes from the desk and shuffle them into some sort of order, clipping them to a clipboard when she's done. Her hair's color is just the first thing about it he notices, the second being that it looks like someone cut the back with a hacksaw. She keeps pushing her bangs up and out of her face, only for them to fall back down again and hide her big green eyes. She's rail thin, the black tights and long-sleeved shirt she's wearing under are too big, cheaply made yukata only emphasizing how twiggy and eminently snap-able her arms and legs are. She bustles around the space, doing the kind of grunt work that would drive Suijutsu absolutely insane. She collects empty test tubes and washes them in the sink. She places the chemicals and powders and whatever that Kabuto took off the shelves back on it, but not before taking long looks inside the bottles, reading the labels on the outside, and making some notes. She then proceeds to take everything on the shelves off the shelves and repeat the process for all of them. Suijutsu suppresses a bubbling snicker. Someone's fucking with this girl, that's for damn sure. Regardless, she runs through whatever inventory she's supposed to be taking surprisingly quickly. Suijutsu would have to double-check his own work mid-stride, but she works with a quick and efficient confidence that's wasted on figuring out how much silver nitrate they have left or whatever the fuck Kabuto and Orochimaru are making her do. Wait, what the fuck are they making her do? This is the kind of shit Kabuto used to do himself. He's watched him do it dozens of times and lost brain cells every time at the mundanity of it all. Orochimaru also does this kind of shit himself, because this is sound and Orochimaru isn't stupid enough to let anyone else touch his stuff. The prisoners are put to work doing basic cleaning and maintenance, but they're not allowed in the labs. The actual ninja of the village barely spend any time inside it, they're too busy maintaining a presence topside to keep the peasants from revolting quite as often. So what the fuck is she? It's at that moment that she finishes her inventory and turns to head for the door. She doesn't make it all the way. Instead, she stops parallel to his tube and gives it a second glance. She turns to look at it with a brow raised. He thinks. Hard to see through all that hair in her face, and oh, no, there she goes pushing her hair out of her face again. That eyebrow is at least halfway up that huge forehead. Her eyes scan up and down the tube, likely watching his liquefied body spin around in this green, viscous stuff. Suijitsu doesn't know what it is, Kabuto would never explain it to him, only that it tastes awful and he hates it. Besides, it's not this stuff on its own that makes it hard, but not impossible, for him to get up into the pipes. It's all the fucking spinning. Trying to fight the force of it and move under his own power is like trying to swim out to sea in the middle of a storm. The only benefit of having to stay liquefied most of the time is bonk. 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 The sound of the girl's gloved finger tapping on the glass hits him like a gunshot. The vibration shakes him down to his currently liquid bones. He drags his body together as quick as he can, building himself from the organs up until a somewhat melty version of his upper torso is gripping the glass and he's glaring at the girl. He snaps, sharp as he can in this state, "Fucking stop that." She jolts back from the glass, yelping, "Sorry. Sorry, I didn't know you were in there." "Well, I am," he growls. "Rule 1 of any aquarium, don't tap the glass. Get it?" She nods, quick and sharp, "Got it." "Sorry." Again. Suijitsu's mouth flows into a frown. "Who are you?" "I'm Lord Orochimaru and Kabuto's research assistant." "Try again." "Excuse me." Suijitsu narrows his eyes. This is sound. Nobody trusts anyone else here, especially not with their research. "Try again." She frowns at him through her hair, tapping her index finger on the back of her clipboard as she holds it in front of her chest like a shield. Sea and fucking sky, this girl must be soft if she's really this scared of a guy in a tube. She tapped on the glass, she knows how thick it is. Dumb and soft as she is, yet still with the gall to dress halfway like a shinobi, you'd think she was from the Leaf Village. Fucking of course. His eyes go wide and his voice comes out in a rushed gout of bubbles. "You're the new body. I knew the sound for fucked up but not this bad. Holy shit, how are you alive?" She frowns at him. "I'm not the body. I'm Sakura Harino, and I am Lord Orochimaru and Kabuto's research assistant." Listen, Suijitsu cuts her off. "Whatever they're telling you, whatever they've got you doing, it's bull. Best case, they're yanking your chain to get some laughs out of you before you become the next meal for the snakes. Worst case, they've got plans." He drops his voice to a whisper. "We can get out of here. I'll help you, you'll help me. Whatever's waiting for you back in Leaf can't be worse than here." She closes her eyes and continues tapping on her clipboard as she sighs. "I'm sorry, but I won't be doing that." Suijitsu twists his face into a snarl. "Listen, you're cute but you're fucking dumb as shit if you don't see. Will you fucking stop tapping your fucking clipboard? It's driving me." Wait a second. One long, drawn out, slow tap. One short tap. Another long, another short. A pause. Short tap, long tap. Oh, fuck, god damn it, he owes Mainjitsu a soda or something in heaven. That fucking code-breaking class at the academy is actually coming in handy. How did this one work again? A combination of short and long sounds make a letter. You pause between each letter, and that makes a word or an abbreviation or something, right? Suijitsu finally puts it together the fourth time. Sakura repeats it. "Cameras. What? Fucking what? Yeah, there are cameras and wiretaps all around the base but not in here, right? Kabuto does tons of shady shit in here. He wouldn't wait. No, fuck that, he totally would. Kabuto runs those cameras. Orochimaru's too busy going balls deep in some science experiment or drinking himself to death most days to check any tapes he doesn't specifically need. Of course there are cameras and wiretaps in here. Anything incriminating can easily go missing. Okay, so she isn't dumb as shit. Might just be plain dumb, depending on what angles those cameras are covering, but not dumb as shit." Suijitsu scowls at her. "The fuck would you ever leave the Leaf Village for, anyway? You guys are the only ones who ever come out of the wars still sitting pretty. Too good for some cushy gig in intelligence." As he speaks, he releases bubbles in the cadence of that same code, WHERE. Sakura catches on quick, tapping away on her clipboard as she replies, "There's more to life than just not starving to death. I had ambitions, but the Leaf Village is stagnant. I outgrew them. GENJUTSUWERECLEAR. Well, that tracks. Suijitsu's always been shit at seeing through that crap. The cameras could be anywhere in the room, then. She could be lying. She could be wrong. This is a Leaf Village code, Orochimaru and Kabuto definitely know it. Fuck it. Worst case, when she tries to screw him over, he screws her right back and lies about double bluffing her. If he was willing to take a chance on Kimimaro and it got her here instead of whoever the real body was supposed to be, then he might have better luck than he thought with this whole subterfuge thing. Yeah, sure, classic line from someone who's never actually starved. Whoareyou? Oh yeah? With a Kekiai Genkai like that, I'd guess you're from the land of water. Your country harvests half the continent's supply of fish, I hardly believe you're doing much starving. SPY. ASSASSIN. AFTEROROCHIMARU. Yeah, we harvest it and then we sell it to the continent. The sea's too fucking lucrative for the daimyo to let just any old fuck fish for himself off the dock. You either need money to buy fish, money to buy the right licenses, or money to buy a boat that can take you out past the Mist Sea and back again. And guess what, we don't have a lot of thanks to getting our asses rocked in every single war. BALLSY. And those islands aren't really rich in farmland, are they? NEEDALLIES. Unless mangrove swamps have suddenly become a kind of farmland while I've been trapped in here, no. You want anything other than fish, you pay out the ass for that too, import tax and tariffs, all that crap being what it is. And? The way Fire Country's daimyo wields tariffs, you'd think he's trying to start another war. WILLHELPYOUESCAPE. Who's to say he's not? The last one put you guys back on the top of the hill. Why not starve everyone out and kill them in their sleep? And? I defected. I am not one of them anymore. WHATDOYOUWANT? Keep telling yourself that, honey. Anyone could clock you as Leaf from a mile away. SWORDS. How? You all live in a fucking forest paradise with good land, good weather, and as much room as you want to stretch your legs. You're the only country that's actually been at peace these last 14 years. You're soft. SEVENMISTSWORDSMEN. THEIRSWORDS. Considering one of us is liquid right now, I wouldn't go calling other people soft. You got to ask me all kinds of questions. Now it's my turn. Who are you? CANTAKEYOUTOZABUZA. FOUGHTKISAME. DIDNTWIN. Suijitsu. First name is all you're getting, honey. HOW? TOBOTH? Ah, I'm flattered you're threatened enough to keep secrets from me. HELPANDILLTELL. Whatever. You're a research assistant, right? Go assist in some research and stop bugging me. DEAL. I think I will. It was a pleasure to meet you, Suijitsu. TALKLATER. Sakura trots out of the room and Suijitsu allows himself a grin he disguises as a leer. This might just be the start of a beautiful friendship. 14 February, 1000. Sasuke Uchiha hates Valentine's Day. If he'd had his way, he'd just forget it existed like every other holiday he'd stopped celebrating for the last 5 years. But no, Valentine's Day isn't a holiday you celebrate, but a holiday you get thrust upon you. Quite literally. For his first 2 Valentine's Days at the academy, the deluge of chocolate from icky annoying girls had been a bizarre and overwhelming experience, and how Taki and his mother would chuckle at his distress when he came home just made it worse. After the massacre came and went like a hurricane, when all he wanted in the whole world was just to be left alone, still they persisted. Most days he arrived to the academy before the rest of his class, but no, not on Valentine's Day. He'd slide open the door and they would be waiting, circling his desk like vultures. And that was just the ambitious ones. Valentine's Day was, of course, a whole-day affair. He would be under constant threat of ambush, with girls coming out from behind shoe lockers and library shelves and supply closets to throw chocolate at him. And for all they were trying so hard to prove that their affections were the strongest, deepest, truest, they all failed to realize he doesn't even like chocolate. Even Sakura wasn't immune. The first 3 years in the academy she'd been too shy to actually give him her chocolate, lingering on the outskirts of the crowd, then running away with a squeak when she actually noticed his eyes on her. But after she and Ino stopped being friends and started being rivals, she'd been just as confident as the rest, and twice as annoying somehow, because, Suzuki now realizes, he'd wanted her to be better than that. After a while he'd just stopped coming to class on Valentine's Day. None of the girls, not even Sakura, were quite brave enough to confront him at his home. And when he thinks about it, last year hadn't been bad. None of his ancillary admirers had the free time to track him down and give him chocolate now that they were genin, and something about Sakura also giving chocolate to Kakashi and Naruto, likely on her mother's urgings to remember her manners, had taken the edge off of her offering to him. He remembers admiring the packaging. It was the same dark blue wrapping paper she'd later used to wrap his Tonto. When they'd broken for lunch in the middle of their pointless D-rank mission, he'd made sure she wasn't looking before unwrapping the chocolate to satisfy his own idle curiosity. The bar had been dark, nearly black, with flecks of red. He'd taken an experimental sniff and come back with bitter cacao and something spicy. He'd stared at it, in naked shock that Sakura had actually picked up on his distaste for sweet things, then found himself staring at the back of her head. He hadn't stared for long. Kakashi had appeared beside him, wondering if he was going to sit around staring and sniffing it or if he was actually going to eat it. Suzuki had glared up at him and shoved it into his empty bento, storming off to some other corner he could lurk in. He'd tried a bit of it when he got home that day. It wasn't very good. But it's all he's been thinking about since he woke up this morning. Suzuki Uchiha still hates Valentine's Day. Because while the holiday is horrible when dozens of girls you don't like swarm you like piranhas, it's even worse when you do like one very specific girl that's completely out of your reach. Is this how the girls that fawned over him felt every year? Like they'd been thrown down a cavernous ravine and hit every outcropping of rock on the way down? Suzuki feels a sudden need to draft an apology letter to Ino at least, if only because she's the only other admirer of his whose name he actually knows. Kakashi is off on another long, drawn-out mission to the ass end of the country with no ETA on when he'll be back. Tsunade is in the capital with the daimyo, handling something so sensitive and urgent it had required her to leave literally in the middle of their last training session. Today is, unfortunately, his day off from the hospital. Suzuki knows, intellectually, that this means he should take the day to train on his own. It'll be good for his mood, too. Physical activity will get the endorphins flowing, he'll be distracted, he'll be busy, it's the right move. He's going to get up right now. Right now. Right now. Any minute now. Now. On now. It's now 10:30 in the morning, and Suzuki hasn't moved from his futon. Just as he's contemplating trying again in 2 minutes, well, no, 5 minutes would be better actually, no, 10 minutes would make it a round number, his door slides open and a huge, hairy weight crashes down across his chest. Suzuki's yelp is more of a strained wheeze. Suzuki doesn't need to look up at the face to see which dog this is, only Bull is big enough to completely fill Suzuki's field of vision with just his flank. That's not gonna get him out of bed, you big idiot, Pakun grouses as his nails scratch across the tatami and he sits down next to Suzuki's head, you're gonna make his lungs collapse. Suzuki wriggles around, freeing his arms out from under Bull's massive body. He concentrates his chakra in his arms and releases it as he goes to push Bull off of him. The dog goes rolling away with a whine too pathetic for such a big animal. Suzuki pulls the excess chakra away from his palms, drags it all the way up to the center of his forehead and lets it sit there, just like Tsunade taught him. It's itchy and distracting and all he wants to do is release it, but that's not what it's for. Pakun pulls his attention from his forehead with a low woof, I stand corrected. You're sitting up, so you're up. Get dressed. You're taking the pack out on a walk. Suzuki frowns, but finds himself throwing the sheets off as he grumbles, you guys are as smart as people. Can't you take yourselves on a walk? Pakun stares, unimpressed, at Suzuki. Even if they can talk and wear headbands, a roving band of 8 mutts running around unsupervised doesn't go over well with the general public. Someone will end up calling the Inyazuka and when Kakashi gets back he'll have to deal with Tsum. And nobody wants to deal with Tsum. Suzuki thinks back to every time he's seen the Inyazuka matriarch. From half-remembered snippets of clan head meetings and official academy functions, He knows she's brassy, confident, and loud. Reminds him a little of Hakume and Tsunade, actually. Reminds him much more of Kiba. Sasuke could probably handle at least one conversation with her. Kakashi. Sweet women like Tsubaki and Shizune can take him right to his knees in a matter of seconds. There's no leaving him to a woman like Tsume's discipline. He wouldn't come out of that conversation alive. Fine, fine, Sasuke grumbles, grabbing scattered articles of clothing and tools, give me 5 minutes. You've got to, Pakun replies solidly before trotting out of the room. Sasuke watches his wagging tail disappear around the corner, not noticing Bull padding up to him until he settles down with a heavy thump at his side. Sasuke turns to get a face full of happy, excited bulldog mix. Sasuke's brow furrows, why don't you talk? Bull replies by licking the side of Sasuke's face from jaw to forehead. Sasuke is surrounded by dogs the second he leaves his room. They weave through his legs like cats and hop from paw to paw, some panting, some yipping, and some just saying walk. Walk? Are we going on a walk? Sasuke swallows hard, then shoves out through his teeth, yeah, we're going on a walk. In a cacophony of barks, howls, and hollers, the pack go barreling out the door. Sasuke swears through his teeth and races after them, taking the stairs down to the street 2 at a time and shoving chakra into his legs to give himself the speed to keep pace. Pakun makes a big show of slowing down to run parallel to Sasuke. Sasuke calls down to the pug mix, where am I supposed to take them? Pakun's face remains neutral but his tail wags double time as he replies, just focus on keeping up. That advice proves to be both patronizing and pertinent, as the dogs quickly swerve into a forested part of the village and run up the trees. Sasuke is forced to turn on his Sharingan to keep track of all 8 of them. They swerve and slalom through the trees on slightly different paths and at very different altitudes. Bahei and Uroshi are the swiftest and the lightest, skipping all the way up to the canopy. Watching them first makes Sasuke feel very heavy and very slow, then makes him kick extra chakra down his legs and race up to meet them. Sasuke's competitive streak knows no bounds. He's not going to let a bunch of dogs leave him in the dust. The dogs drag him all across the Leaf Village. They bound across the rooftops downtown and Sasuke rattles shingles off them with the force of his chakra-enhanced jumps. They make it to the wall and run along it, forcing Sasuke to divert chakra to one arm to keep his balance. The dogs skirt around the Uchiha district, but the adrenaline gives Sasuke the courage to cut through it, even using some of his old shortcuts to get ahead of them. When the dogs catch up to Sasuke they fall in step with him. Sasuke can feel the rhythm of their chakra pulsing from their paws with every footfall and hear it in their panting. He feels his own rhythms start to sync with theirs, until he's no longer struggling to catch up with them or fighting to stay ahead, but comfortably in the center. He runs not as their human minder, but as part of the pack. Sasuke feels himself grinning as the wind bites at his face. They bound past the academy training yard, the sight of the dogs and Sasuke distracting all the kids and ruining Iruka's lesson. They stampede past Ichiraku Ramen, Sasuke only barely catching Toki and Ayam shouting a greeting. They strafe around a team of newly graduated genin carrying a familiar cat back to the Hokage Tower and spook it out of their grasp. It's near sunset when the pack finally starts to slow, veering off the road toward the Naka River. They all dive down the bank, rolling down the grassy slope. Sasuke is the last to go sliding down the river bank. He comes tumbling to a halt in the middle of the heap of dogs, panting as loud and as hard as any of them. After a moment he rolls up, leaning back on his hands, face turned up to the sky. A shadow passes over him. He opens his eyes to find Hinata staring directly down into them, eyebrows up behind her bangs. Sasuke blinks a couple times, then lamely says, "Hey." Hi." Her eyes sweep around the dogs, "Are these?" Uroshi rolls over onto his stomach and yaps up at Hinata, "Hi. I'm Uroshi. This is the pack. We're out walking Kakashi's boy." Sasuke whips around to shoot a wide-eyed, bewildered glare at Uroshi while Hinata's hands fly up to her mouth, failing to stifle a laugh. "You are not walking me, I'm." Guriko cocks her head to one side while lying on her back, "We're not? I thought we were." Pakun said we were. Said you were being all sad so we had to walk you like we walked Kakashi when he got sad as a puppy. Hinata bursts into breathless laughter. Sasuke can only sputter ineffectually, trying to come up with any concrete evidence that he's been walking the dogs instead of the other way around and finding none. Hey, Akino and Biscuit sniff intently at Hinata's pants, likely smelling Akamaru. Bull drops his huge, heavy head onto Sasuke's lap. Pakun continues to stare blankly at Sasuke while his tail wags so fast he can hardly track it. Sasuke thought cats had the market cornered on smug, but Pakun has proved him wrong. Hinata folds herself down next to Sasuke and offers him a warm, weary smile. I get it, Valentine's Day is hard, sometimes. Especially times like now. Oh. Fuck. Right. He's not the only person whose crush is miles away. Sasuke is getting used to these moments when he's reminded exactly how much of a self-centered ass he can be, but he still doesn't like them. Sasuke rubs at the back of his neck with a wince. How have you been holding up? Hinata shrugs, reaching out to scratch Shiba behind the ears. I mean. I've been doing my best. It feels. It's stupid. I know if Naruto was here I wouldn't be able to give him anything. I'd just panic and run off, but there's a difference between won't and can't, I suppose. Sasuke leans over, bumping Hinata with his shoulder. No, you'd definitely give him something. If you didn't pluck up the courage yourself I'd force you to. Hinata grins, bumping him back. So then. So would I be allowed to force you to give Sakura something on White Day? Sasuke snickers. Sure. Turnabout's fair play. Hinata's smile slowly falls as she leans her head on his shoulder, and she murmurs, sometimes. Sometimes I feel bad that I miss him. It's just. Our whole lives, I've always known exactly where he is. I could tell the time by him. Him being gone. It's like if the Hokage Monument, or the Academy, or Ichiraku just disappeared. And I feel. It feels like I've been taking him for granted, that I just expect him to always be around, but I still miss him. Does that make sense? Sasuke presses his cheek into the top of Hinata's head. Yeah. Completely. Hinata and Sasuke lean on each other and watch the last of the winter snow melt surge downstream, surrounded by tired, contented dogs. Chapter 2, Spring I. 28, March, 1000. It's Sakura's birthday and she's disposing of a body. The move up to the northern hideout brought with it a change in scenery, climate, and altitude. It's also introduced a different class of rote, mind-numbing busy work. Sakura has been reduced to a glorified zookeeper, going from cage to cage in the ever-expanding grid of iron and stone halls, feeding the living prisoners and cleaning the cells of the deceased. That, of course, involves removing corpses. It's inefficient to lug whole bodies all the way back to the labs, so Kabuto and Orochimaru have devised a system that's somehow much more gruesome. Kabuto's instructions read almost like a recipe: take samples of the hair, blood, and skin. Remove the list of organs tattooed on the small of the prisoner's back. Remove the prisoner's hands. Remove the prisoner's clothes and burn them. Separate the head, torso, arms, and legs. Cut the torso and each limb in half. Douse the parts in oil. Set fire to the parts without using chakra. Drop the parts down the chute to the pit once they've finished burning. Rinse and repeat. The first time she'd dissected and dismembered a corpse, Sakura had vomited in the corner of the room and sobbed into the sleeves of her hand-me-down yukata. The fifth time, she'd gotten sick enough of mopping up her own vomit that she forced her gag reflex to cooperate and cried quietly as she worked. Now, the 25th time, Sakura's eyes are half-lidded and she's listlessly going through the motions. Apparently a shinobi really can get used to anything for the sake of the mission. Sakura wheels 2 carts behind her through the halls, one filled with dozens of identical bento boxes and the other with refrigerated cases to hold the organs and samples. She's tucked her scalpels into her weapons pouch on her thigh and shoved the bone saw into her obi, staining it red. The ring of cell keys jangles around her wrist like an oversized bracelet. Sakura's sense of humor is wearing down like a shoreline enduring eons of tides, because she's starting to wonder what would happen if she switched one of the bento boxes with one of the sample cases, and every ghoulish image her brain is concocting just makes her snicker all the harder. Sakura shoves a burst of chakra into her feet and picks up the pace. She needs to get out of this hideout and get some fresh air or she's going to completely lose her mind. Her final stop breaks her out of her pattern. This cell has a grand total of 7 locks, 5 on the door and 2 securing a pair of flimsy chains across it. Sakura's brow immediately furrows. The locks aren't her concern. The chains are completely out of place. They aren't reinforced with chakra or connected to any kind of seal. These chains wouldn't stand up to an enterprising bicycle thief, let alone a shinobi. They're pure security theater, but for whom, Sakura has no idea. She frowns as she undoes the 5 locks on the door. Information is worth more than gold right now. Time to get digging. Sakura follows standard procedure, opening the door 6 inches and pushing her hair out of her eyes as she peers inside. There's a young man curled in the far corner directly across from the door. The fluorescent light catches on his bright orange hair and brings attention to the rise and fall of his broad, muscular shoulders. Sakura's eyes trace down his body and stop at a big, ugly cuff around his ankle made from black iron. The cuff trickles down into a chain connected to an iron ball twice the size of her head. Before Sakura can start making inferences, the prisoner's head tilts to reveal one burnt red eye, staring directly at her. She freezes. His brow furrows, and in a deep voice he murmurs, "Kimimaro? Is that you?" Sakura bites the inside of her lower lip. Backlit and from a distance she probably does look a bit like Kimimaro, doesn't she? The sound uniform and all the weight she's lost certainly don't help. She'll have to approach this delicately. The young man's eye suddenly goes wide and his voice drops into a snarl, "No, you're a stranger. You're a girl. You're not him." It happens so fast Sakura almost doesn't see it. The young man leaps to his feet with a swiftness belied by his tall, robust frame. Black splotches ooze across his skin like a slime mold. His right arm and leg change, flesh shifting and growing to form a long grasping claw and some kind of vent on the back of his calf. There's a burst of chakra from the vent. The young man comes rocketing across the cell, claw grabbing for her face. Sakura's curse mark flares painfully to life. She channels cursed chakra into her arms and shoulder checks the heavy steel door. She slams it down on the young man's wrist and pins it in place. He swipes at her with his claws and she watches the keratin rearrange itself, creating serrations. The claws scrape against the metal, drawing sparks that dance in the glow from the young man's one gold eye. He growls like an animal, "Another copy, and a bad one too. I'll shred you into tiny pieces, until you're just lean meat." Sakura grits her teeth and thinks as fast as she can. Whatever's wrong with him has to do with the curse mark. Release of adrenaline and chakra can make the curse mark activate on its own. If she can trick his adrenal glands into thinking the threat is gone, that will at least shut off the flow of cursed chakra. It's the best plan she can come up with on such short notice, so it's what she's going with. Orochimaru's voice plays in her head and her skin crawls as she reverse engineers a genjutsu he taught her, meant to trick the fight or flight response into making the body freeze in response to imaginary danger. If it can be used to make the body think there's danger, it can be used to make it think the danger's gone. Orochimaru could do it in an instant. Sakura's going to need a few seconds she may not have. Sakura weaves her fine net of yin chakra, shouting to keep the young man's attention, "Calm down. I'm not going to hurt you." The door rocks against her hold, straining against the flimsy chains. "You won't get the chance. I'm gonna hurt you, gonna make you scream and cry and beg and then I'll kill you." Sakura grits her teeth, focus split between the genjutsu, holding the door, and her distraction. "Just listen to me. I'm not a threat, you don't need to kill me, just calm down and we can talk." For a split second, Sakura lets herself throw all her focus into the genjutsu. The young man lurches against the door, shoving his whole head and shoulders out through the crack and lunging for her with his claw. Sakura weaves the finishing threads of chakra around his mind and slams her hands into the tiger sign. The net closes. His hand stops an inch from her throat. The young man's breathing starts to slow. His claws go still, his pupils dilate, his shoulders sink down from up around his ears. The transformed areas of his body don't recede, not right away, and Sakura gets dangerously close to panicking before the young man takes a deep breath. On the exhale, the muddy gray skin fades to its normal pallor and his limbs twist back into a standard arm and leg. Sakura lets her brow furrow. Either he has better control over the curse mark than she thought, or his mark works differently than hers. Information is worth more than gold. The young man shrinks away from the door, pulling it almost all the way closed. He peeks out at her through a gap an inch wide, his eye locked on her in something like awe. Sakura takes a few deep breaths of her own and draws the cursed chakra back into the mark. He's not the only one who needs to calm down. He whispers in a shaking voice, "How did you do that?" Sakura shrugs one shoulder, her lips quirking up at one corner into the best smile she can manage, "Genjutsu. Nothing harmful, I promise. It'll wear off on its own after about an hour." He blinks slowly, his voice coming out in a crawl, "Who are you?" "Sakura Harano, Lord Orochimaru, and Kabuto's research assistant," she replies, bowing slightly at the shoulder. "I briefly met Kimimaro when I joined." "Were you two friends?" The young man's fingers tense on the door. "He's my friend." "He is. He was the only person who could calm me down, he's the reason I'm here." "Did the illness finally take him?" Sakura runs her hand through her bangs with a sigh. "I honestly don't know. Kimimaro helped me get to Sound, some 6 months back. I was being chased, he let me know how to find the main hideout and stayed behind to fight my pursuers. Either they killed him or the illness did." The young man's eyes rest on her feet for a few moments before he shakes his head. "No. He never wanted to waste away. He went down fighting." His eyes slowly travel up to meet hers. "Fighting for you? Why?" Sakura presses her lips into a thin line. "Kimimaro didn't die for her. He died for Orochimaru. He died for the body Orochimaru would one day inhabit. He died secure in the knowledge that he'd helped prolong his master's life when Sakura's only goal was to cut it short. Sakura has two options. Either she licks Orochimaru's boots or she puts traitorous words in a dead man's mouth." She lets her eyes roam around the hallway, feeling with her chakra for hidden cameras and wiretaps. There are 2 cameras facing the door and one in the young man's cell. Sakura bites the inside of her cheek. Genjutsu can trick whoever's on the other end of a camera a lot better than the machine itself, and she doesn't know any lightning-style techniques that could fry the systems, even temporarily. So she smiles at the young man and deflects, "He and I believed in the same thing." "Well, introductions are a two-way street. What's your name?" The young man's eyes dart from her to the chains and back again. My name is Yugo." "Please, do whatever you came to do and go. When your genjutsu wears off I might try to kill you again, and I don't want to kill you. Especially not if you were important to Kimimaro." It clicks like a lock in Sakura's mind exactly who these chains on the door are meant to reassure. Sakura frowns as she grabs one of the bento. "Is that why you're here? To keep you from hurting people?" Yugo nods. "Orochimaru and I have a deal, I guess. He keeps me contained and I let him experiment on me." Sakura has so many questions and each and every one of them would be way too incriminating and invasive for a first meeting. This isn't like Suijutsu. The last thing in the world this guy wants is to leave. She's going to have to become his friend before he becomes her ally. Sakura strategically pushes her bangs out of her eyes and speaks a piece of her mind. "That's a shame. You shouldn't have to resort to something this drastic to get help." Yugo twitches a shoulder in a shrug. "Nothing else has worked. At least, not for longer than an hour." Sakura hands him the bento and replies brightly, "Well, while I'm around I'll do my best to keep you calm. Here's your dinner." She leans in with a grin and pitches her voice down into a whisper, "Let me know if there's anything you want me to sneak into yours next time." Yugo tentatively opens the flimsy plastic bento, trying and failing to hide how his nose wrinkles at the rice and canned pork. Sakura winces in solidarity with him. The only fresh and plentiful food they have in the hideouts is rice, thanks to the land of Sound formerly being the land of rice paddies. Everything else is canned, dehydrated, or modified in ways Sakura isn't willing to mess with. She's so busy thinking about eating a real, home-cooked meal that Sakura near misses Yugo mumbling, "Beef is probably too much to ask for. Too expensive. But maybe sardines." Sakura grins and steps back from the door. "That I can definitely do. See you tomorrow, Yugo." Sakura shuts the door, locks all 5 locks, and heads for fresh air. 9 April, 1000. The cherry blossoms are in full bloom as Hakume sips her coffee and watches Suzuki somersault out of the way of another boulder. Her in turn, a main house kid by name of Teo, is staring wide-eyed at the action 2 floors below. If he were any more engrossed, or 3 years younger, his face would be pressed right to the window. Hakume can't exactly blame him. Watching a fully matured Sherry-non at work is always a trip, one way or another. He glances over his shoulder at her, agog. Do they do this every day? You should have been here last week, Hakume replies, deadpan. She was making him dodge arquebus bullets. And down to the floor goes Teo's jaw. Don't be too impressed, Hakume remarks around another sip. Like I said, he was dodging bullets last week. He's supposed to be breaking those boulders now. Teo stares at her like she's grown a second head. The 5th Hokage is teaching the last Uchiha how to break boulders and you're telling me I shouldn't be impressed. Yeah, because you should be doing my paperwork, Hakume shoots back. Hop to it, little cricket. One time, I ate a bug one time when I was 7 and no one in this clan will let me live it down, Teo grumbles. He plops back down across the table from Hakume, getting back to filling out medication orders and discharge papers with a running commentary of whispered bitching. He activates his Byakugan and Hakume rolls her eyes. If he wants to make himself sick trying to focus on 2 things at once, that's his mistake to make. It's a Hyuga rite of passage at this point. Hakume's eyes move in lazy arcs, tracking the motion of the boulders Tsunade throws and Suzuki ducking out of the way of them at the last possible second like it's a giant game of chicken. They're coming faster and faster now. It's turning into a veritable meteor shower out there. The kid is fast, but he's not omniscient. And Tsunade's never lost a game of chicken in her life. Something's gonna give in 3, 2. One of the boulders slams right into Suzuki and sends him flying into the nearby trees. And 1, Hakume mutters. Teo winces hard. Is he gonna be alright? Could be, could not be, Hakume replies with a loose shrug. Why do you think Tsunade trains him next to the hospital? Teo nods to himself. Yeah, actually that tracks. Hakume props up her chin, eyes following the distant figure of Tsunade as she stomps over to Suzuki and peels him off a tree that's buckled nearly in half. She doesn't need to see her face to know she's scolding him. She has her hands on her hips and is tapping her foot like she always would when Jiraiya was being an idiot or Orochimaru was being stuck up. Suzuki is dusting himself off, scowling at the grass. After a few moments his head whips up and he's snapping something back at Tsunade. Hakume arches a brow. The kid must be either brave or stupid to mouth off to the 5th Hokage. Probably the usual, unstable, Uchiha cocktail of both. Suzuki and Tsunade's voices slowly rise to the point where Hakume can faintly hear them through the glass. She thinks she picks out the words brat, pissant, and shove my foot so far up your ass. Standard Tsunade vocabulary. Teo frowns. What are they doing now? Screaming at each other, by the sound of it, Hakume replies, and after about 5 more seconds of this Suzuki's gonna go storming off and Tsunade's gonna uproot one of those trees. Teo grimaces. Do they do this every day? No, Hakume grouses, this is a new one. But the kid's a testy teenager, it was gonna happen eventually. Like clockwork, Suzuki storms off in a random direction and Tsunade watches him go for a few seconds before turning and roundhouse kicking an oak tree right out of the ground. Hakume rolls her eyes, sets her coffee down on the table, and opens the window. I'm taking a walk, Hakume says, already halfway out the window. Those better all be done when I get back. Teo glares at her back. You're the worst. You're the complete, absolute worst. Hakume smirks over her shoulder at him. Don't I know it, cricket? She hops out the window, the sound of Teo yelping one time, quickly disappearing as she falls 2 stories, a burst of chakra from her feet cushioning her landing. She starts walking after Suzuki and whistles high and sharp to draw Tsunade's attention. Tsunade glances over at her and Hakume calls across the grass, Yo, slug queen. You need good cop or bad cop? Tsunade rubs at her temples with a groan of, the kid's a tangled mess, so. Not mad, just disappointed cop. Hakume shrugs, I'll give it a shot. She strolls down the petal-littered street at a leisurely pace. The intermittent monsoons have been making the kid's knee ache like an old veteran's war wounds. There's no way he got far. And far he did not get, since Hakume finds him on the rocky bank of the Sogyo River, ostensibly attempting to skip stones across its wide expanse but really just throwing rocks in it. Hakume puts her hands in her lab coat pockets and lets Suzuki chuck a few more stones before she remarks, "You're gonna give some poor fish a concussion, kid." "Go away," Suzuki snaps without even looking at her. He picks up another stone and throws it with an unnecessarily loud grunt. Hakume forms the tiger seal and a gust of wind blows the rock back at Suzuki, hitting him in the center of the forehead. "For an Uchiha you've got shit for manners," Hakume remarks, heading down the bank to stand next to Suzuki. "You backtalk like that in the Hyuga house, you're getting 50 lashes with a bamboo switch." Suzuki's eyes flicker in recognition, but he stubbornly keeps his jaw clenched shut and refuses to look at her. Hakume closes her eyes and pinches the bridge of her nose. Fuck's sake, she gets enough of this from Niji. How did she let managing the emotions of teenage dirtbags leak into her professional life, too? Put another tally mark under things Tsunade owes her for. Alright, take a breath. Suzuki and Niji are bizarrely similar. When Niji gets like this, all he really wants is an excuse to rant about everything pissing him off. Time to bait the hook. Hakume's hands go back to her coat pockets and she idly asks, "Training isn't going well, huh?" Suzuki shuts his eyes and takes a deep breath in. Hook, line, sinker. His mouth opens and he's off to the races. There's no point in learning that strength-enhancing technique. A medic's supposed to never get hit, I've got that down. She trained me to be fast, Kakashi's training me to be fast, I have all three Tomo, I know the Chidori, I'm working on the chakra scalpel, I don't need to punch someone's head off their shoulders when I already know how to kill people in one strike. What's the point? If it's really so important that I learn this, why can't I use my Sharingan and copy it from her? We're wasting time. Hakume rolls her eyes, so the genius prodigy actually has to work at something for once. My heart absolutely breaks for you, kid. Suzuki proves himself the most easily baited person on the planet as he shoots back, I'm fine with working, I've been breaking my back and losing hours of sleep learning basic medical ninjutsu, I've been living in the on-call room, I can handle that. I'd rather be doing that than learning some stupid technique I'm not gonna use. Tsunade won't let me enter the Chunin exams until she thinks I'm ready, and I'm already ready. I was ready in January and I'll be ready in July, but she's so obsessed with this dumb fucking strength technique thing that I'll never be ready to her. Suzuki flops down into a crouch, rubbing at his left knee and scowling out at the river. His eyes track the cherry blossom petals drifting along its surface. He's staring at them with enough heat to set them on fire. Hakume will give teenage boys one thing: they're easy to read. The kid is going stir-crazy as a genin with no team and stewing in his own inadequacies as the rains in an entire season named after the girl who abandoned him only make it worse. Standard angst, easily untangled. If you want a couple of practical reasons why you need to be that strong, Hakume remarks, looking for a flat stone to skip, the first is that a field medic is gonna be paying the bills with disaster relief missions. You need to be able to remove any obstacle between you and the wounded yourself, because your team won't always be there to do it for you. Some of the tension drains from Suzuki's shoulders. His eyes dart down to his feet. Kid's definitely kicking himself for not considering non-combat applications of the technique. Reason the second, Hakume continues, picking up a rock the perfect size and shape for skipping, is that incorporating fine-tuned chakra control-based techniques into combat conditions your muscle memory. If it's not just something you whip out when you have to heal, it's easier to do on a moment's notice. That's not just Tsunade's philosophy, that's standard practice. For example, check this shit out. Hakume skips her stone. The moment after it hits the water, Hakume forms half a hand sign and sends a thin, concentrated gust of wind after the stone. It bounces the stone up, higher and higher, like it's skipping through air. Once it's 10 feet up, Hakume whips her fingers around in a circle. The wind cuts clean through the stone, dicing it up into a collection of tiny cubes before scattering it into the water. Suzuki's eyes are wide, but his jaw still tightly shut this time to keep it from dropping. She puts her hands on her hips. Any teacher worth her salt knows to play to her students' strengths. Mine taught me ninjutsu, and kid, you take to taijutsu like a duck to water. You're already blending Lee's style, our style, and your medical knowledge to hit soft spots and hit them hard. It'd be a waste not to teach you how to punch people's heads off their shoulders. Sasuke lets out a sigh through his nose. He's still not looking at her, but he's traded an impotent rage for simple sullenness. Hakume turns to face him, steel in her eyes. If you're serious about being a medic, you need to leave this attitude problem of yours at the door. The enemy and the whims of fate don't give two shits about your personal problems. If you break chain of command in the middle of a crisis because you're pissed off, that's an entire mission down the drain. That's lives lost, people hurt, and security compromised. But you already know that, don't you? Sasuke nods, murmuring, yeah. Yeah, I do. Good. Now, Hakume grabs Sasuke by the back of the collar and yanks him up. Go apologize to Tsunade and get back to work. Double time, Uchiha. Sasuke glares at her, but there's no fire in it. He turns on his heel and starts jogging back to the hospital, grumbling all the while under his breath about how all these crazy women in his life just can't get enough of dragging him around by the collar, and maybe he will stop wearing these shirts, it'd serve them right. Hakume allows herself a smirk, and follows casually behind, taking her sweet time. After all, Teo needs all the help he can get if he's gonna be done with her paperwork by the time she's back. 13, May, 1000. Sakura scuttles along the ceiling like a spider, eyes locked on her opponent. The young man, some poor unfortunate abducted from the land of grass, is still occupied with a swarm of illusory duplicates dancing circles around him on the floor. He shoots streams of acid from his palms, passing right through them and melting sections of the floor down through the soil. Orochimaru and Kabuto look on from the far wall, Kabuto vaguely focused on the action on the floor with the glazed eyes and slight frown of someone who has much better things to be doing, while Orochimaru's eyes have been flawlessly tracking her through her greater invisibility jutsu. She frowns and forms the ram seal, let's make him work for it. Sakura sinks into the ceiling, sliding down through the concrete into the floor. She slides around him in wide circles, looking for the perfect opening to slip between her duplicates and strike. The second she sees one, she starts darting in, but the young man flies through a few hand signs and stomps his heel against the stone. Rays of acidic chakra flare out across the ground, melting everything in their path. And one is coming right for Sakura. Sakura swears under her breath and leaps up out of the ground. She throws that momentum into a back handspring, bouncing out of immediate danger. The young man's eyes zero in on her between two of her duplicates. He charges at her, zooming through yet more hand signs before firing another gout of acid from his hands. Sakura bobs and weaves around the acid, strafing to the right and sending her duplicates whirling the opposite direction. He stays on her tail, focusing fire, and chasing her down. From the corner of her eye, Sakura sees Orochimaru lean back against the wall, crossing his arms over his chest. She hates that she's already gotten so used to picking apart his every move to try and divine anything about his mood. She hasn't even gotten any good at it. If she had to guess, he's getting bored. To be fair, so is she. She lets the young man keep her on the back step, kiting around the acid and running in a serpentine pattern to draw them both to the center of the room. She draws a kunai, and its glint in the harsh white light immediately draws the young man's eye. Hand seals flash and now he's spitting acid right at her wrist. Sakura jerks her hand out of the way, getting clipped across the knuckles instead of losing her hand. The pain is still enough to make her drop the kunai in shock. He grabs it out of the air and stabs for her eye. Sakura doesn't have time for all the hand signs. She releases the valve on the curse mark, the cursed chakra exploding across her skin like water from a broken hydrant. She slams her hands together into the hair sign and snarls, "Sensory overload jutsu." The young man's eyes go wide, his pupils dilating to nearly fill the iris. He recoils with a scream, immediately covering his own ears. She knows what's going on behind those gigantic pupils. The lights are now blindingly bright, every sound loud as a bullhorn. The feeling of his prisoner uniform against his skin is scratching at him like dozens of tiny claws. Sakura jukes backward and the young man tears his hands away from his ears. With a snarl he starts blind firing acid, and as she swerves around it, Sakura glances from the corner of her eye to Orochimaru. He's back up off the wall, but other than that, no hint of approval or disapproval. Fine then, time to end this. She drops the sensory overload jutsu, freeing up space in her mind for concentration. Sakura only needs to run through dog and snake now before her visible, tangible form blows away on an illusory breeze. The binding death tree isn't ideal for a wide open space like this with no backup, but that's not what she needs it for. Before setting the tree she has a precious 5 seconds of being completely invisible and completely untouchable. It's the only way she'll survive long enough to find an opening in this acid rainstorm. Sakura prowls around her opponent, holding her breath. She watches for an opening, counting down the seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2. For a split second he whirls so his back is to her and he's firing at the opposite wall. Now. Sakura conjures the tree around him, imagining the feeling of bark biting into her skin and a thick, heavy tree trunk against her back. She merges with the image of the tree, kicking up the young man's back and perching above his shoulders. She melts from the tree, pulling a senbon from the holster on her thigh as she locks an arm around his throat. She raises the senbon and briefly meets Orochimaru's eyes across the concrete expanse. She has her opponent immobilized, unable to make hand signs, and completely at her mercy. That would be proof enough of her skill anywhere else. But not here. Orochimaru arches a brow, cocking his head to one side in silent challenge. Sakura looks down at the young man's face. His features are still soft, his pulse races against her grip, his eyes dart between her and Orochimaru as they silently plead for his life. Sakura purses her lips. She thrusts her senbon into the exact right spot on his throat. Just as Kabuto said it would be, the effect is instantaneous. The young man jerks once in her grip before sagging with a long wheeze. The tree dissolves into fog and Sakura lets the young man's corpse crumple to the ground, stepping back. If she did it right, he didn't feel a thing. Sakura is drawn back to the world by the sound of clapping harmonizing with Orochimaru chuckling, "Very nice, little flower. It seems fluorescents have been doing you as much good as sunlight." She straightens to meet his gaze, smiling deferentially in the face of his patronizing grin. "Thank you, sir." If Orochimaru is anything more than amused, he doesn't show it. Kabuto can assist you with the cleanup. Once that's through, report to Lab 114. I'll give you further orders then. Orochimaru turns on his heel and trots out of the room. Sakura stares after him, taking deep breaths through her nose, until Kabuto comes to a stop at her side. There's only one body and neither one of them wants to test their field dissection skills, so Sakura takes the shoulders and Kabuto takes the legs. They wordlessly heft what had been a young man fighting desperately for his freedom only seconds ago up off the stone floor and make their way to the mortuary lab. Kabuto breaks the silence. "You're a quick study." Sakura twitches a shoulder. "Lord Orochimaru is a good teacher." Kabuto's lips quirk up at the corner. "That's not what I'm talking about." Sakura forces herself to keep breathing easy, to focus on putting one foot in front of the other. "Oh." Kabuto nods. "You've learned the most important lesson sound can teach you. That when you're in the pits of hell, a painless death is the greatest kindness you can give anyone stuck down there with you." Chapter 3, Samurai. 4, June, 1000. Sasuke had been sure that the most boring part of this diplomatic mission to the Sand Village would be the meeting itself. He'd played the role of stenographer for Tsunade in council meetings before and this one would be no different. He had expected to nearly lose his mind cycling between identical conference rooms, taking notes on incredibly dry, subject matter, and helping Shizun work the carousel slide projector because technology hated that woman about as much as Sasuke hated Itake. He'd been half right. The meeting had started out fascinating. For one, the passive-aggressive sniping and backbiting shoots up dramatically when the council consists of more than 2, sometimes 3, elderly people who are united in their desire to tell Tsunade she's doing everything wrong. For 2, watching Shizun take charge of a room in Tsunade's stead is bizarrely captivating. She never raises her voice, because she never has to, effortlessly controlling the volume and pace of discussion with a few well-placed words and a disarming smile. For 3, Sasuke had no idea how hot-button an issue the Land of Rivers even existing as an independent state is, especially for the trading powerhouse that is his home country and the parched Land of Wind. But then it had been time to discuss the Chunin exams. And it just would not do for a genin to be in the room while they went over that. Was Sasuke even going to participate in the exams? He had no idea, the damn thing was a month away. But still. The principle of the thing, you know. So here Sasuke is, standing out in the hall, arms crossed over his chest and back up against the adobe wall. He glares at the opposite wall, tapping his foot and grinding his teeth. The worst part of this isn't that the Sand Council didn't respect his position as Tsunade's apprentice. It's not that Shizune didn't stand up for him nearly as much as she should have. It's not even that there's no clock out here and Sasuke left his watch at home, leaving him with no idea how long he's already been waiting. It's that Taunton was allowed to stay in the room and he wasn't. She's not a security risk, Sasuke grumbles to himself, nobody's going to gossip with a pig. Hello. Sasuke turns his shocked jump into a fighting stance, whirling on his heel with Sharingan already blazing to face the voice. They alight upon he thinks confused Gaara. For a long moment they stare at each other, waiting for the other to move. Sasuke takes the hit, shifting back to lean on the wall again as he wheezes, "How did you sneak up on me like that?" Gaara blinks, "I didn't." Sasuke frowns, "What? You did. I didn't hear you coming, you appeared out of nowhere. What were you doing? Was it teleportation jutsu or something?" Gaara blinks twice, "I walked in." Sasuke very pointedly says nothing, because he would rather endure 30 seconds of awkward silence than admit to someone he's not sure is even his acquaintance that he'd been too busy grumbling about pigs to notice their presence. In the midst of that silence, Gaara blurts out, "Do you want to see my cacti?" Sasuke stares at him for a moment, then replies, "That is an incredibly weird question." Gaara's gourd ripples, "Does that mean no?" "It means you're showing me right now," Sasuke replies, pushing himself up off the wall. "Are we going far?" Gaara shakes his head, already turning to leave. "No, not very." Unlike in the Leaf Village, the Kazekige's residence is in the same building as their administrative office, on the very top floor. Sasuke doesn't even try to keep himself from looking all around the main room, comparing it against its equivalent in the Leaf Village. The rugs covering the stone floor are the only similarity, and even that is like apples and oranges. The rug adorning Tsunade's floor is diverse in color and pattern, a feast for the eyes filled with images of soaring birds of prey and blooming vines. These rugs are infinitely more modest, woven from goat hair and dyed green when it's dyed at all. The patterns are an intricate web of geometric shapes that radiate across the rug like the rays of the sun. Sasuke doesn't need to be an expert to guess they were woven by different tribes. There are no chairs, no sofas, just cushions of varying sizes arranged around a central hearth made from the same adobe as the walls. The low tables and hanging lamps are made from tarnished brass instead of living wood, forged with the same intricate, interlaced geometric design sensibility as the rugs. On the far wall is a pointed arch-shaped divot in the wall, within which sits a small altar. The altar is the only piece of wooden furniture in the main room, covered with mother-of-pearl inlay and yet more geometric design. On top of it 2 brass incense burners sit on either side of a photograph of a woman with blonde hair and Gaara's sharp cheekbones. Sasuke's eyes crawl from the photo to the brass tables. Strewn across them are the ephemera of a lived-in home, from such general signifiers as a forgotten lime-green drink whose ice has nearly melted, to the specifics like a pot of purple face paint and a set of metal tools. "It hasn't always looked like this," Gaara suddenly says, as if he knew exactly what was on Sasuke's mind. "When my father was before the exams, this room was a lot cleaner. The cushions are supposed to stay on the edge of the room, the rugs are all crooked, and Gaara takes a long look at his siblings' things, then continues in a softer voice, "We didn't spend much time out here." Sasuke heard stories about what kind of man the 4th Kazekage was. He can imagine exactly what this place was like when he was alive. The main room was a space for guests of the Kazekage, not for family. The children were never to leave their rooms except to dart quietly out the front door, and lived separate lives as the older 2 cowered in fear of their youngest brother. The girl, because that is, without a doubt, what the 4th Kazekage must have called her in mixed company, was allowed to leave if the help was indisposed, but only to cook and serve. If anything was out of place, and the Kazekage would know if anything was, there would be consequences. Sasuke shoves his hands in his pockets. "Why do you guys still live here?" "We're allowed to stay until the new Kazekage is chosen," Gaara replies, crouching down to slip a coaster underneath the green drink. "It's easier for the council to keep track of me if I live above their chambers. And to marry in Kankuro." Another long pause from Gaara. He spends this one staring through one of the porthole windows. I don't think it's nostalgia, Gaara murmurs. I don't think things were better before our mother died. I think they see leaving this house and all its memories behind as letting our father win. Gaara's room sits on the north side of the house. Nearly every flat surface is covered in potted cacti who merrily soak up the desert sun pouring through the window. On a table to one side is a large fish tank, lovingly decorated with rock formations and aquatic plants, in which a little goldfish is swimming to and fro. A piece of lined paper taped to the tank reads, "Sushi. Feed twice daily. Keep water between 6.8-7.4. There are an impressive variety of succulents, many of which Sasuke has never even seen pictures of before. He drifts from pot to pot with Gaara shuffling a foot behind him, quietly telling him both the scientific and common names of the plants. There are little round cacti covered in inch-long spines with bright yellow flowers, Phaerocactus cylindraceus, or desert barrel cactus, tall cylindrical cacti with coats of shaggy white hair, Cephalocereus senilis, or old man cactus, tiny cacti dwarfed by their own bright red flowers, Rebutia minuscula, that one doesn't have a common name, branching cacti with pad-like stems, Opuntia microtices, or bunny cactus, and dozens more. You're gonna need your own greenhouse soon, Sasuke remarks, unless you plan on putting some on your bed. Gaara considers that for a moment before shrugging one shoulder. You can take some with you when you leave. Some of them produce chemicals good for medicines and poisons. And it's likely we'll be kicked out of here soon. Wherever we can afford on our mission pay probably won't have enough room for me to house them all, so I should start finding them new homes. Sasuke frowns over at Gaara. They've passed you over for Kaze Cage. Another one-shouldered shrug from Gaara. Not exactly. They've dusted off an old law meant to take effect if there was insurmountable conflict within the council over who to appoint. It calls for the organization of a public vote. Any currently serving shinobi of Chunin rank or above may campaign for the position, and any ninja of Genin rank or above or civilian 16 years old or older is eligible to vote so long as they're a citizen. The fact that they legally can't pass me over if I'm alive and willing to take the position but don't want me assuming it apparently counts as conflict insurmountable enough for them to do this. Sasuke scowls at one of the taller, skinnier cacti, so instead of just rejecting you outright they're setting you up to fail. Gaara nods. They know it will be difficult for me to sway the public to my side. I will first need to perform so well in the upcoming Chunin exams that even in the face of the disaster last year and my well-deserved bad reputation the council has no choice but to promote me. And as for the campaign itself, Temari and Kankuro have explained to me many times that sound policy doesn't count for very much when your character is in doubt. Sasuke nods to himself, blinks a few times, then turns to shoot a bewildered look at Gaara. Wait a minute, sound policy? This isn't a Naruto thing. You actually, what kind of policy are you talking about? Gaara's voice is even and calm as he explains. For one, fixing our relationship with the nomadic tribes. In the past the daimyo would use us to harass and cow them into accepting him as their sovereign, and when they won an amount of autonomy the daimyo and third Kaze Cage decided to instead instate a law that barred us from accepting any mission requests from autonomous tribes since, technically speaking, they're not citizens of the Land of Wind. The autonomous tribes are the people who need our protection the most. Moving through the desert with valuable herds of goats and other animals makes you a target for bandits, yet we aren't allowed to provide them with it. Then there's the fact that our most common and lucrative missions to protect water sources usually are a smokescreen for us keeping that water source exclusive to our employer, which... Okay, Sasuke cuts in, waving a hand. Okay. You've actually put a lot of thought into this. Gaara cocks his head a single degree to the side. Why would I not? The Kazekige's post is a serious responsibility, one my father abused. I don't understand how someone could go after it without understanding the issues they're going to be facing. Sasuke's memory conjures the image of Naruto going pale with terror when confronted with any of the bureaucratic realities of being Hokage. How indeed? Gaara's face twitches in a strange, aborted attempt at a frown, and as a ninja in the field, I can protect myself. My sand protects me, and only me. If I become the Kaze Cage, I can use the power of the office to extend that protection. But it won't be worth much if I don't know what I'm protecting people from. Sasuke takes a long look at Gaara, watching him fidget in place, the sand shell of his gourd rippling like a pond in a rainstorm. He doesn't need to ask what Gaara thinks his chances of winning are. Sasuke's brow furrows and he asks, "If your odds are so bad, why are you running?" Gaara purses his lips and remains silent. He pads over to the fish tank, watching the goldfish glide around the water. He checks the clock on the wall, then pulls a tin of fish food from a desk drawer and sprinkles it into the tank. The fish gobbles it up, Gaara watching attentively to make sure it finishes every bite. "I may not win," Gaara remarks, "but I spoke to Naruto on the day of Lady Tsunade's inauguration. He was of the opinion that trying counts for something, even if you don't achieve the exact result you want. I will still be a ninja after this election, whether or not I'm Kazekage. If through this campaign I convince even one of my peers or our civilian charges that these issues are important, if my efforts result in more people that are alive and safe, then I will be satisfied." He turns to Sasuke with a smile that's more in his eyes than his mouth, and, well, Temari and Kankuro have appointed themselves my campaign managers. They're much better at communicating with people than I am. Sasuke smiles to himself. If Gaara can raise a goldfish in the middle of the desert, there's no question he'll become Kazekage. 23, July, 1000. Sakura's in the middle of moving a shipment of rice to the storerooms when she remembers it's Sasuke's birthday. She drops the bag of rice on her foot. The pain does nothing to shock her back into survival mode. All she can think about is being 13 years old and so excited as she spun on her stool in Ichiraku, presenting Sasuke with a tanto she'd saved up weeks of D-rank mission pay to have custom made. Her cheeks had burned with pride as Sasuke looked at just the box in awe, because even he had forgotten that it was his birthday. Naruto had loudly lamented not knowing and not having a chance to buy a gift of his own. Kakashi had spent the whole dinner looking on in amusement, eye crinkled at the corner, the only evidence of his smile. Sakura grabs the rice and hauls it frantically to the storeroom so she can shut the door behind herself and press her hands into her eyes. She breathes in shuddering gasps. Trying to force her mind away from home is having the exact opposite effect. Dinner at Ichiraku on Sasuke's birthday flows into her mother braiding her hair and Sasuke and Naruto adjusting to her father's old yukata in her living room on the day of Tsunade's inauguration, which flows into her and Sasuke laughing in her hospital room after midnight over the absurdity of her being matched up against Gaara, and it's a never-ending stream of white water rapids that drags her under and smashes her hard against the rocks. She's 14 but she feels 7 years old, sobbing like the academy girls from minor clans are making fun of her for her forehead. The intensity of the flood of emotion makes articulating it all in an eloquent, mature way impossible. Because it isn't eloquent. It isn't mature. She's scared and she's cold and she's hungry and she wants to go home. She wants her mom. She wants Kakashi. She wants Danzo to send her a message saying she's done enough and she's allowed to go home. She wants a grown-up, any grown-up, to sweep in and take her home. She wants to be wrapped in a blanket and given a mug of hot chocolate and told she can cry for as long as she wants. But this is sound. And she can't cry here. Practicality draws her back. She keeps repeating to herself, over and over again, that if someone catches her not doing her job that will draw suspicion from Orochimaru and Kabuto. If they see her getting homesick, they'll doubt her commitment. If they doubt her commitment, they'll doubt her motives. If they doubt her motives, they'll start unraveling all her other lies, and then she'll be dead. If she's dead, Sasuke is at risk. Naruto is at risk. The village and everyone who lives in it is at risk. Too much is riding on her ability to keep her shit together. That thought almost sets her off again. Sakura forces herself to take deep breaths and hisses, "You have rice to move, get it together and move it." Sakura storms out of the storeroom and stomps back the way she came. It takes every ounce of focus she has to push herself forward, putting one foot in front of the other, all the while keeping her mind on the moment and not how much she misses the taste of her mother's yakisoba. This single-minded focus almost puts her directly in the line of fire. She doesn't notice the sake cup flying through the open door until it whizzes just past the tip of her nose. It shatters against the wall behind her and Sakura can't suppress a shocked yelp. Her arms fly up to shield her eyes from any ceramic shrapnel. Sakura has barely recovered from the shock when she gets another, "Ha! I don't know what's worse, your reflexes or my aim." Sakura, for a moment, can only blink. That cannot be who she thinks it is, drunkenly slurring through that sentence. She turns to look through the open door. Sakura had been vaguely aware there was a wine cellar of some sort down here with the rest of the provision storage, and through the door she sees tens of thousands of sake bottles on shelves that go up to the ceiling and recede into darkness. Orochimaru is reclined loosely against the shelf directly across from the door, an empty bottle and several cups scattered at his side. His paper-white skin makes Orochimaru's drunken flush all the brighter. Through his hair, far stringier and greasier today than Sakura's yet seen it, his gold eyes make a concentrated effort to stay locked on her. He wags his chin towards the shelf. Make yourself useful for once. Get me another bottle. Sakura has no idea how to play this, so she lamely stammers, I was in the middle of moving the rice shipment. This time she has ample time to see Orochimaru pick up one of the two remaining sake cups and fling it at her forehead. She catches it out of the air and chokes down a scowl, as well as the urge to chuck it right back at him. I gave you an order, Orochimaru snarls, get in here. Sakura reluctantly does. Despite being legally allowed to drink since she graduated, Sakura knows absolutely nothing about alcohol. Her mother would kill her if she touched the stuff before she turned 20. As she pretends to scan the shelves for an appropriate bottle of sake, she weaves a subtle genjutsu over her face to hide her bloodshot eyes and blotchy cheeks. Even like this, she can't let Orochimaru know she's been crying. Sakura plucks a random bottle out of the shelf and hands it to him. Orochimaru takes it and snorts, feeling homesick, little flower. Sakura's heart almost stops. What? He turns the bottle around so she can read the label. It's emblazoned with the Leaf Village's symbol. Sakura reads the fine print and finds it's brewed by some minor clan within the village walls. Sakura sucks back her sigh of relief. For once, honesty will benefit her. Speaking frankly, sir, I picked the bottle without looking at it. Orochimaru rolls his eyes. Of course you did. Civilian like you, probably haven't even tasted a drop of the stuff. Not that the taste is even the point, but Orochimaru cuts himself off with a long swig straight from the bottle. Why did he even bring the cups? Sakura should probably be taking this moment to quietly excuse herself, but all she can do is stare down at Orochimaru. There are deep bags under his eyes, and now that he's stopped teasing her and is just examining the label on the bottle, his mouth has fallen into a sour scowl. There's a faraway look in his eyes, like through looking at the leaf symbol he can see all the way to the village. Figures, Orochimaru grumbles, even in the former land of rice paddies nobody can manage to make a better bottle of sake than the Geke clan. I think this bottle's older than I am. That's a feat all on its own. Is he the one who's homesick? Sakura almost asks, but quickly pivots before the words can get all the way out of her mouth. I mean, if we're comparing you to alcohol, you're not that old. There's wines made 100 years ago that still haven't finished aging. Orochimaru doesn't throw another cup at her, instead just arching a brow and slurring, really. I feel like I've spent 100 years trapped in a barrel. You think I'm this pale naturally? Nope, comes from spending every goddamn day underground. Just watch. You're gonna go from blushing petal pink to white just as fast, that's a fact. Sakura doesn't know what to say. Usually Orochimaru's jokes lean more on the dark humor and bad side of the spectrum. Self-deprecation isn't something she thought he had in him. Orochimaru takes another pull and continues, his consonants melting into each other. Tha's probably why Kabuto's plotting against me. Why let Children spend time in the sun and suddenly they're too good for your hole in the ground? Sakura shoves herself back into character and forces her eyes to go wide, sputtering, he's what? Kabuto would n. Don't, Orochimaru snaps, glaring up at her, you're too smart to play dumb. You've got to be a little bit dumb yourself to put authenticity into th performance. You've seen it just as well as I have. He made sure to play the middleman for the sound for, making sure I wouldn't know you were on th way stead of Suzuki till why we're already here. Same for the security cameras and the wiretaps. Either he thinks I don't notice his clever lil edits or he just doesn't give a shit anymore. Sakura purses her lips and lets a tiny bit of honesty leak through, well. He's constantly telling me about how everyone in the Sound Village is out for themselves, so. I don't think he gave a shit to begin with. Orochimaru throws his head back and cackles, of course. Of course he's trying to use whatever you're really here to do to his advantage. Clever, clever, oh so fucking clever, why the fuck do I keep taking clever children? I was a clever child, I know what you're like but no I never learn. Sakura puts on her best indignant frown and lies, I wasn't lying to you about why I came here. Course you weren't, like I said, you're smart, Orochimaru grouses, rolling his eyes as he rolls his neck, you know how to hide a lie by reframing the truth around it. That way why can stick to the true parts of your story when you're under pressure and steer question in to avoid the lies. Are why here to gain power and knowledge? Certainly. Do you have a chip on your shoulder so deep it should sever your arm from your torso? Absolutely. But Orochimaru peers up at her, gaze still sharp and calculating through the haze of alcohol. The day I met you, first thing I learned about you were willing to blindly sacrifice yourself for Sasuke. That kind of love, it can be twisted, it can be tainted, but why can't he get rid of it? Not without cutting out your heart. Sakura's brow doesn't even start furrowing before Orochimaru scoffs, I know that look. How does this old snake know anything about love? Trust me, I know enough. I know, a fucking scream yourself awake nightmare that keeps randomly poppin' in to throw you off your axis when you need it least. He lets the bottle drop from his hand so he can run both through his hair with a heavy sigh before mumbling to himself, to hell with her and Kato and Jiraiya and the whole fucking thing. Sakura stares at him, arms hanging loose at her sides. Slowly, she asks, Sir. Are you, alright? Orochimaru extracts his hands from his hair. He stares silently at the open door for a long moment. That's my business, Sakura, he mutters, not yours. Sakura doesn't say anything. She settles down next to Orochimaru and pours sake into the 2 cups. She takes one for herself and holds the other out to Orochimaru. It takes him a couple tries, but he plucks it out of her hand. He raises the glass with a lopsided grin and unfocused eyes, Kanpai. Orochimaru tosses back the shot and Sakura pours hers back into the bottle while his eyes are closed. 5 August, 1000. Kanpai. The whole table knocks back their drinks. Sasuke immediately regrets it. He thought he could handle the burn, he's had literal fire coming up his throat since he was 8, but no, this is uniquely terrible. He is absolutely still too proud to admit that. Thankfully sake comes in small doses, and Sasuke swallows the whole thing before coughing up a puff of smoke and surreptitiously pushing his glass over to Kakashi. Kakashi chuckles and leans in to mutter in his ear, yeah, that's about how my first drink after making Chunin went too. This a terrible tradition, Sasuke gripes, how is this a reward? You've got me, Kakashi replies with an easy shrug, from the looks of some of your friends it's not even their first drink. Ino and Kiba are taking a commanding lead, as they always do when alcohol makes its way into the conversation. Sasuke starts counting the minutes until one or both of them has to go vomit. Tenten and Niji are sipping modestly at their drinks and pretending for guy's sake that they're the first they've ever had. Lee, Hinata, Shino, and Koji have followed Sasuke's lead and let either their friends or sensei take the alcohol out from under their noses. Sasuke leans over to Shikamaru on his other side and wonders, did Ino keep her hair short so she wouldn't need anyone to hold it back? Shikamaru smirks over at him and elbows him in the ribs, you and Ino are on ribbing terms now? What did I miss during the exams? Sasuke rolls his eyes, me getting a crash course in field stomach pumps. People kept trying to poison Koji and accidentally hitting Ino instead because they didn't distinguish between his food and our food. You'd think it'd be common sense that a clan that eats to fight is immune to 65% of ingestible poisons, but the rock ninja just couldn't get enough of that low-hanging fruit. Shikamaru's brows hop up, huh. Then yeah, she probably did. He bumps Sasuke with his shoulder and continues around a bite of his short ribs, thanks for looking after them, by the way. I know they're pains in the ass, but they're my pains in the ass, so. Ino spills over onto Shikamaru's shoulder with a cackle of, Were you worried about us, Shikamaru? Of course I was, he drones, if you died out there I would have been obligated by clan alliances to ruin 15 years of peace with Rock and start the 4th Shinobi World War. And that would have been an even bigger pain in the ass than dealing with you every day. I can't tell you how much it means to me to hear you say hanging out with me is less annoying than World War IV, Ino sighs, it really warms my heart. Truly. Gotta love that will of fire camaraderie, Asuma sighs, glancing longingly at the no smoking sign on the wall. Hey, Kiba calls out, raising his glass again, another toast. Tagara, for making Chunin and being one step closer to the Kazekige's hat. If he can be the youngest Kage in history, then so can I. Only about half the table toasts this time, and Sasuke cranes his neck around to ask Hinata, how many of these should we expect? Hinata shrugs a shoulder with a smile and replies, probably around 4 or 5, depending on when he finally blacks out. I'm curious, Sasuke, Kurane remarks, resting her chin on her steepled hands, now that you're a Chunin, will you start a hospital residency or stay in the field? Sasuke blinks, pausing in the middle of plucking some beef tongue off the grill, Tenten snorts, come on, this is Sasuke. We know better than to ask him about any goals with a term longer than the end of the week. Sasuke frowns at her and shoots back with a mouth full of barbecued meat, I have long-term goals, Tenten. Yeah, but the term on those is usually someday, she retorts, stealing a bit of pork belly he'd been saving, also they're gloomy and serious and no fun to talk about so they don't count. Sasuke just scowls and activates his Sharingan to help him snatch the pork belly right out of Tenten's chopsticks. Tenten's jaw drops, you. Motherfucker, you better not. Sasuke shoves the pork belly in his mouth without breaking eye contact. Tenten gets up onto her heels to reach across the table and smack Sasuke on the back of the head, you asshole. First you steal my place as Tsunade's apprentice, now you steal my food. What's next, my boyfriend? Language, Tenten, Guy and Lee chorus in perfect affronted harmony. Please, Ino scoffs, Sasuke and Niji wouldn't last a week. Shino nods and rasps in a voice permanently damaged by smoke inhalation, it's like if you have 2 queen bees in a hive, one of them would kill the other before too long. Niji's brow furrows, what? Sasuke and I get along fine. Tenten leans hard on his side, sneaking a piece of liver from Niji's plate, it's different when you're dating. Niji narrows his eyes and swipes it back, no it isn't. The only significant difference between our relationship before we started dating and after is the amount of time we spend alone. Tenten stares at him, unimpressed, really. All the making out isn't significant. Niji immediately goes bright red and Tenten collapses into giggles. Ino slaps Lee on the shoulder to get his attention and points at his teammates, how the hell did that even happen before Naruto pulled Niji's head out of his ass? Lee contemplates that question for longer than it deserves before answering, to be perfectly honest, I do not know. I did not know it was happening until it had been happening for a month. Kiba's hand goes up in the air and everyone groans as he shouts, another toast. To Sakura. Because if that mission to get her back hadn't gone so fucking badly, none of us would have trained this hard to prove ourselves. We're coming for you, Sakura. Sasuke can suddenly feel every eye on him like a red welt on his skin. He toasts Kiba with his water and takes a gulp. Everyone goes back to conversation, but it's like a spotlight is shining on his seat the way everyone keeps fidgeting in place, eyes downcast as they flicker toward him then quickly away. Sasuke quickly finds he has to make a concentrated effort to keep his face at least neutral. Even Kakashi's posture has stiffened and he's making nervous askance glances, like he thinks Sasuke's about to have some kind of sobbing meltdown. Sasuke drums his fingers on the table. These people are his friends. Friends are supposed to know you. They should know that one little mention of Sakura isn't going to send him spiraling, especially not when he's having a good night, when he's enjoying himself. It's like he's 8 years old again and coming back to class for the first time after the massacre to a gaggle of anxious children walking on eggshells around him. He wants to get up and leave, go to the bathroom for a bit or pop out into the alley and take a breath, but then everyone will think he's off crying his eyes out over Sakura, and the last thing he wants is to give them even more reason to pity him. Sasuke is shocked out of his reverie by a napkin, folded into the shape of a shuriken, hitting him in the chest. He follows its trajectory to meet Koji's eyes. He wags his head in the direction of the door to their private room. Sasuke's brow furrows, but he gives him a shallow nod. After a few more moments, Koji gets up with a mutter to Ino and Asuma about heading off to the bathroom. Sasuke waits 10 more heartbeats before excusing himself with the same line. He follows Koji to the restroom and finds him in front of the sinks, fiddling with his hands like Hinata. You looked like you were gonna burst into flames in there, Koji remarks. You alright? I was, Sasuke snaps, but then everyone started looking at me all concerned just because Kiba mentioned Sakura, like I was gonna break down in public over it or something, and I. Koji's eyes go wide and he cuts in, wait, you thought everyone was looking at you? Sasuke's train of thought hits a mountainside and crashes. Koji shakes his head, you're hopeless, that's what you are. Ino's been calling you that since the Forest of Death last year, but I'm only really now getting it. Do you? Did you think you and Naruto were the only people on that mission or? Koji frowns at the mirror and mutters, actually, I read the mission reports, I know that's exactly what you thought. Sasuke opens his mouth. No words come out. Koji lets his head hang with a sigh, this isn't what I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to thank you for being our third in the Chunin exams. Sasuke pulls a hand up to rub at the back of his neck, it's nothing, Koji. It's not like there was anyone else. There was, Koji cuts in, meeting Sasuke's eyes, there always is. Every year there's dozens of career genin trying to get out of that ditch. Ino almost wanted to go with one of them, said it'd be better training for us to run with someone we don't know instead of you, but I wasn't gonna do it without you. Sasuke's train of thought finds itself derailed once again, careening off a cliff and into the sea. Huh. Koji's hands and voice are shaking now, You know what I had to do during the Sakura retrieval mission, right? Sasuke remembers his stomach flipping as he read that part of the mission report and he hoarsely replies, yeah. I didn't. I don't know if I wasn't sure if I could trust myself, Koji whispers, I needed someone to be there if I choked in a fight, or if Ino got hurt even worse than during the mission, and you're a medic. You're getting scary good at taijutsu. You were the only choice. So. Maybe Ino was right, maybe having you around was kind of a crutch, but. Koji, I know more than I should about crutches, Sasuke interrupts, crossing his arms over his chest, I know if you need one, it's because without it you can't walk. We both got promoted, so objectively you did better than great, you did amazing. If I was a crutch, at least I was one that worked. Koji doesn't respond with words. He responds by walking up to Sasuke and brusquely pulling him into the biggest, tightest bear hug he's ever received. Sasuke freezes for a moment, eyes going wide. Once the moment passes, he struggles to free one of the arms Koji pinned to his side. When he finally wriggles it loose, he brings it around to awkwardly pat his back. Yeah, I get it, Sasuke chokes out, if we keep this up for much longer everyone's gonna steal the last helpings on the barbecue, you know. Yeah, I know, Koji mutters into Sasuke's shoulder, there is, and I don't say this kind of thing lightly, more to life than food. Chapter 4, Autumn 4, September, 1000. Tadama barely qualifies as a village. Most of its territory is made up of rice paddies, with the settlement itself consisting of a collection of squat buildings hugging the river. Harvest is a month away and the fields are full to bursting with healthy crops, but Tadama's men, women, children tend them in tattered clothes that hang loose on too thin bodies. The buildings that aren't made from literal scrap show their age not in their style but in the amount of rot in the beams and holes in the shoji. Even from her vantage point at the top of a high hill, Sakura can spot a mangy little girl digging through the trash behind what she guesses is the only tavern. Sakura was always good at math. It takes her no time at all to calculate the ratio of field to building, average out what the yield of these fields could be from a good harvest like this, ring up a price for that yield, and come to the conclusion that someone is screwing these people. Considering how many bags of rice she has to move to the storerooms every week, she thinks she knows who one of those someones is. Don't act so surprised, Kabuto sneers at her side, throwing Sakura back into the moment. Get far enough from a country's hidden village or its capital and you'll see all the same things. Come on. We need to enter town just as the sun's setting if we want a plausible excuse to stay. He turns and starts heading down the hill, dropping a transformation jutsu over himself as he walks to become a plain peasant looking haggard from a day of hard travel. Sakura follows his lead, turning herself into a girl with brown hair, brown eyes, and a farmer's tan made darker by dirt. She hops up onto the back of the wagon and Kabuto takes the front, leading their nearly lame mule back onto the road. Sakura leans against the bags of surplus masquerading as their trade goods, watching the road into town rumble by through her eyelashes. Like clockwork, they roll into town exactly at sundown. Kabuto asks around about a place to stay the night. The roads are hardly safe by day in the land of sound, after all. They hitch up their wagon in the stable and head into the only tavern. As Kabuto gets everything sorted, Sakura watches over her shoulder as that same filthy little girl sneaks into their wagon and steals away with as much of their surplus as she can carry. She wonders if Kabuto will even care that it's missing. She's certainly not going to tell him. They settle in for a meager meal and drink that's far too strong, all the while scanning the barroom for their target. The woman that arrives at 7 would look ordinary to most assessments, middle-aged with gray-streaked hair and muddy eyes. The difference comes in how she carries herself, hiding her fatigue behind perfect posture and walking with the expectation that people will clear the way for her. And clear it they do. Heads perk up as the woman makes her way to the bar, eyes light up and people call, "Good to see you, Anoka," from across the room with wide waves of their arms. Anoka receives the attention with a grin and small talk peppered with personal questions, such as inquiries about the health of parents and if children have written back from the city. Sakura pretends to sip her moonshine. They've found their mark. Kabuto and Sakura nibble at their dinner, whiling away the hours watching Anoka hold court. She moves through the people with ease and grace, a favorite aunt to some, a little sister who's grown up well to others, a drinking buddy to make raunchy jokes with to yet more. She is Tadama's favorite daughter, no mistaking. As the night rolls on, the tavern starts to empty, with everyone who trickles out making sure to do it in full eye and earshot of the two strangers. The curious glances they've been getting all night start to turn to annoyance. "Last call in 1 hour, the bartender calls, just a bit too loud for a warning only 2 patrons will actually need." Kabuto meets her eyes for a split second and taps out a message on the table, "WAITFIVEMINUTES, THENWEGO." Sakura takes a small bite of her rice with one hand and taps a reply with the other, "Okay." They spend the next 5 minutes finishing their meal, then quietly excuse themselves up the stairs to their room. Once the door is shut and the shades are drawn, they set the scene. 2 shadow clones are transformed to match their disguises and bundle themselves under the futon covers. Sakura drops her transformation so she can focus on draping a greater invisibility jutsu over the two of them, and Kabuto complements it with a genjutsu to muffle the sounds of their breathing, footsteps, and the rustling of their clothes. They move on silent feet out of the room and down the stairs, backs against the wall. The barroom has transformed into a war room, with chairs pulled up around a large round table in its center. Anoka sits at the honorary head of the table, surrounded by 9 other farmers whose eyes are all on her. Drinks have been set in front of them all, but no one raises them to their lips. There's a low murmur of conversation between them as Anoka sits in silence and stares at the tavern door. The bartender is still present, wiping down the same glass as their eyes cycle between all the entrances and exits. Anoka clears her throat and all conversation ceases. "All right. Harvest is next month, so we don't have a lot of time left. How are we on defenses, Soda?" One of the men, clearly too old to still be farming, replies, "Son Hien should be returning with the black powder any day now. According to his letters, the powder monger was good for it, didn't look too close at the counterfeit headbands and papers, just like we heard." Anoka nods, the knot between her eyebrows failing to come loose. "Was he able to get any firearms?" Soda winces. "He said that the powder monger didn't have any to spare, but, you know how he is. He probably let that anxiety get the better of him and quit while he was ahead." Sakura feels with her 6th sense the chakra covering Kabuto move towards the table. He glides around it like a ghost, the crackle of chakra surrounding him raising the hairs on the back of the peasants' necks. When he passes Anoka, he dips in, sprinkling something colorless and odorless into her drink. He moves away and Sakura shuffles closer. She drip feeds chakra into Anoka's mid and hind brain, imagining the feeling of her throat going drier and drier. After a moment, Anoka takes a sip of her drink. "Can't be helped," Anoka sighs, "the powder kegs are valuable enough on their own. So long as we can fashion a fuse and make a spark, they'll do. Sound Village thugs will be coming to collect on the 10th, so we'll need to have all our tools ready to be used as weapons and the road and river barricaded by then. Kyoko, have we made any progress on the river?" Kabuto sprinkles the powder into Soda's drink next, and Sakura leads him to take a sip. A young woman with boyish short hair speaks up, "Yeah, so, you know how a ways upriver is that old village, Jiajin? The one that turned into a ghost town? Well, we were looking around and a lot of the old irrigation systems they put in place still work, so we can just close those dams instead of having to use ours and risk them getting too close too soon. Would that work?" Kyoko is next on Kabuto's list as he circles around the table like he's playing a demented game of duck, duck, goose. Sakura plays along. Anoka shifts restlessly in her seat, but forces herself to smile and reply, "So long as we can get there and back with time to spare the night before, it should." Now, the big question. The last several meetings we haven't gotten any closer to an answer, but it's getting down to the wire. We have to decide this now. Are we evacuating everyone else? There's a long silence before a middle-aged man with a dark complexion and a shaved head sighs, "I mean, what choice do we have? This isn't their fight, anyone who isn't here didn't consent to this revolution, if things go wrong. Fuck's sake, Ryo, every single meeting you go on and on about this being a matter of safety, but it's not. A man so young he's little more than a teenager cuts in, it's a matter of logistics. We don't have the resources to just pack everyone up and leave and send them off in the middle of the night. Even if we sent people off on the water buffalo, in every wagon we have and in every boat we have, that'll still not be enough for everyone. If we try to trickle it out over the 10-day harvest, people will notice and they'll talk. It's just not feasible to send everyone away. Powder in their drinks and dryness in their throats." Kabuto comes around behind Sakura and taps a message on her back, "ONEMORE. It is absolutely a matter of safety." One of the older women fires back, "Pyongho, if this goes badly, they will kill everyone. They'll burn Tadama to the ground and salt the earth. They will erase any trace of us having ever existed. I don't want that for my children, for my grandchildren. If we send them away they can escape that." Kabuto drops the last dose into her drink. After Sakura's ministrations, she takes an angry swig. Now all there is to do is wait. Like there's any escaping a ninja, an older man scoffs, "Anyone who flees will be tracked across oceans and deserts. Doesn't matter how good you are at hide and seek, the shinobi always cheat." The older woman runs a hand through her iron gray hair, "It's not too late to hire rogue ninja too." A tall, broad-shouldered man breaks his silence by slamming his fist on the table and shouting, "Absolutely not. Why do you think we're starving? It's so they always have enough to eat. If we cave and hire ninja to protect us, we're no better than that cowardly piece of shit squatting in the daimyo's palace. They left their villages, they hate the system as much as we do. Have you even looked in a bingo book lately? It's full of monsters too insane for even those glorified asylums to handle. They can't be trusted to uphold a contract. It's not like we even have the money to pay them, anyway. But without them, all we have is a couple casks of gunpowder and a bunch of farming equipment. How are we supposed to?" There's a loud clatter as Anoka is the first to fall out of her chair, convulsing on the ground. Her pupils have blown out, her limbs extended, her spine curves with each convulsion until she's all but completely arched off the ground. There's not much time to fret over her. Soda is the next to fall into a violent seizure, foaming at the mouth. Everyone Kabuto visited drops in short order, one after another, and those who remain frantically dart between the afflicted with no idea how to treat them. The tall man points to the door, "Go get help. Go." One of the 5 remaining farmers, a young man, looks to the door and starts to move. Sakura catches him before he can. The young man makes a run for it, but trips over a chair she'd convinced him wasn't there, slamming face first into the ground. The packet of poison goes flying out of his pocket as he falls. So Kabuto's been busy, too. The young man pulls himself to his feet and makes it to the door, but it's too late. Anoka violently seizes once, twice, a third time, then falls completely limp to the ground. Soda follows, then Kyoko, then Ryo and Pyongho and the poor older woman. The 5 remaining farmers stare at the scene, eyes wide, jaws on the ground. The bartender keeps wiping down the same glass. The tall man spots the packet and snarls at the young man, You son of a bitch, you turned on us." "What? No, what are you talking about? Don't fucking lie to me. You slipped that shit in their drinks. I swear to you I didn't. Sakura takes hold of the young man's brain again, and after a moment his eyes go wide. He should be seeing an umbu tattoo peeking out from the tall man's sleeve. He grits his teeth. All this time. All this fucking time you. The young man reaches down and pulls a dagger off his belt. The tall man's eyes go wide and he doesn't have time to react before the dagger is deep in his throat. He crumples to the ground, letting the young man go. The three remaining farmers, an older man and two women, stare at him in complete shock. The younger of the two women points at him and screams, "Get the knife away from him." They rush the young man and grab him by the arms, but he flails wildly in their grip, smashing one's nose in with an elbow and dropping the dagger. The younger woman runs in, grabs the dagger, and Sakura tricks her brain into sending an excess of adrenaline rushing through her bloodstream. In a breathless panic she starts stabbing the young man repeatedly in the chest, over and over and over. By the time she's knocked away from him it's too late. He falls in a bloodless heap in the middle of the carnage. The older man grabs a chair while the older woman tries to talk the younger one down. Sakura drops her hold on the younger woman to take hold of the older man. When he turns around with the chair in hand, the women's positions will be reversed, the younger standing where the older truly is. He creeps up behind the older woman, raising the chair high above his head. He brings it down on top of her skull. It fractures with a loud crack and she falls limp to the floor. The younger woman lets out a shriek of terror and rushes him with the dagger. Sakura doesn't intervene. She watches them struggle, the man using the chair like a makeshift shield and the woman desperately trying to stab at him around it. In a split second she gets a lucky shot, weaving around the chair and burying the dagger in his gut. He staggers back and topples to the ground. As the young woman's hands fly up to cover her mouth, eyes filling with tears, the bartender finally sets down their glass. They reach behind their back and pull a kunai off their belt. They toss it with a practiced hand and it pierces the young woman's throat. She topples to the ground, twitching once, twice, then going still. And then there were none, Kabuto remarks as they both drop the genjutsu concealing their presence. Excellent work, Sakura, Raven. Let's get going. If we leave now we can intercept the agent carrying the black powder. Sakura doesn't say anything. Kabuto stares for a moment, then just shrugs and heads out the front door. The bartender's transformation drops, revealing the gray and black fatigues and porcelain bird mask of a sound umbu. They start to head out after Kabuto, but pause next to Sakura. They ask in a deep, feminine voice, "I'm always curious about how you genjutsu types weigh what you do, at the end of the day. Do you feel like you killed them?" Sakura's voice comes out hoarse, "Yes." Raven is quiet for a moment, then remarks, "Well, you're the first I've heard say so." They leave Sakura alone in the room. Once they're through the doors Sakura darts between the bodies, looking frantically for someone, anyone who isn't dead yet. Miraculously, the woman who'd been hit over the head with a chair is still breathing. She likely has a concussion, but she's not dead. Sakura runs behind the bar, grabs some ice, wraps it up in bandages from her pack, and runs back to the woman. She uses the rest of her bandages to secure the ice to the swollen part of her skull, then gently slaps her cheeks to rouse her. The woman blinks herself awake, bleary-eyed. Who? Sakura puts a finger to her lips. SSSSSHHHHH. Listen to me. You need to play dead for a little bit longer, okay? After 10 minutes, get up, get your family, and leave. Tell everyone you can what happened here. The Sound Village did this, they tried to assassinate everyone here, but you can be the survivor. If you're smart and you're careful you can bring them to justice. Just remember to play dead for 10 minutes exactly. Don't fall asleep. All right. The woman stares at her, eyes unfocused. Oh. Okay. Sakura quickly nods and, with some rearranging of the broken and overturned furniture, obscures the woman's head from view before making her way out of the tavern. Before she crosses the threshold she drops a simple genjutsu over her face, giving her red-rimmed eyes and tear tracks on her cheeks. She and Kabuto return to their wagon and Raven disappears into the darkness. Their mule limps along the road, Kabuto up at the reins and Sakura sitting in the back. Check the cargo, Kabuto orders, I think I saw one of the street rats trying to steal from the wagon. Sakura pretends to check, and reports, looks fine to me. 13, October, 1000. Shikamaru is in the midst of kicking Suzuki's ass at shogi when Suzuki suddenly asks, about how much does the Nara clan keep in savings? Shikamaru's brow slowly arches, his piece hovering an inch above the board. Really wish you weren't so fucking awkward, Suzuki. The hell kind of question is that? Suzuki frowns at him for a moment, but his face quickly snaps into a look of proper embarrassment. Oh, F no, I'm not. Listen, I haven't actually been engaged in clan politics for like. I was gonna say 6 years, but no, actually I never really have. I'm not trying to like, I just need a point of comparison for something. Shikamaru lets his eyebrow come back down and sets his piece on the board, taking one of his pawns. For what? Suzuki moves one of his lances and explains, now that I'm a Chunin I can finally access the Uchiha clan's bank account. When I first looked at the amount in there I was fine with it, it is a lot, but after a bit, I started thinking that for a whole clan it didn't seem like all that much. We were both pretty big and pretty rich, all told, but it's been a minute since I've actually had a real sense of perspective about clan stuff. I was 8, an 8-year-old probably doesn't have the best sense of scale where wealth is concerned. Shikamaru drums his fingers on the board, one half of his mind making calculations and the other looking for his next move. How much is in the account? 20 million ryo. Shikamaru immediately looks up to meet Suzuki's eyes. The account's been locked since the massacre, right? Yeah. Assets frozen, too, but considering we didn't invest much outside the clan it's not really necessary. Then yeah, there should definitely be more money in there, Shikamaru replies, with a ninja clan that size raking in money from normal missions, the police force, and all kinds of investments, even after taxes 20 million is next to nothing. You're sure the account was locked? Suzuki takes one of Shikamaru's pawns. That's what the brass kept telling me. I requested a list of statements covering the last 6 years and it didn't show any change. After that I went looking through my old house to see what my father's records on the account looked like, but anything that hadn't been looted was so damaged by the elements I couldn't read it. Shikamaru closes his eyes and pinches the bridge of his nose, groaning, great. More shit that doesn't add up. Exactly what I needed. What a drag. Suzuki narrows his eyes. You know, last year you asked me if I trusted Tsunade. When I asked you why you wanted to know, you put it off, said we'd maybe talk about it over shogi. Shikamaru drags his hand down his face. Yeah, I did say that, didn't I? Suzuki gestures loosely to the board. Well, here we are. Here we are indeed. Gimme a second, Shikamaru mutters, pulling himself to his feet and closing the storm shutters around the Ingawa. Between my missions and not really making any progress I've been keeping this to myself, but if the whole Sakura Orochimaru connection only hinted at you being a central piece of this puzzle, this confirms it. You deserve to know. Suzuki leans forward, bracing his elbows on his knees. All right then, let's hear it. Once all the storm shutters and shogi are closed, giving them privacy, Shikamaru settles back down and begins. So, this all started when we got the mission to go after Sakura. Right off the bat I got the feeling that something about it was wrong. A bunch of genin and a chunin being sent on an A rank into enemy territory is one thing. Now that I've got distance from it and know you vouch for her, I can understand that was probably the only way Tsunade could get people on Sakura's trail before it went cold. That's not the problem. The problem is Sakura herself. Shikamaru locks eyes with Suzuki. Level with me, Suzuki. You know Sakura. You know her better than any of us. Better than you think. Would she really resort to going rogue just because she's got an inferiority complex? Suzuki stares at the arrangement of pieces on the board for a long moment, before letting his eyes slide closed and sighing. When we were 6, Sakura tried to turn herself into the police because one of her library books was a day overdue. To get her to break the rules you need to make her desperate or show her a loophole she hasn't already found. That's exactly what I thought, Shikamaru continues. But I also thought of something else. Judging by what I saw from Sakura in the second and third exams last year, Sakura's willing to do whatever is necessary within the confines of following orders and the rules. So Sakura going rogue on her own doesn't make sense, but what about Sakura going rogue because someone put her up to it? Suzuki's eyes snap open, wide with shock. What? Think about it, from the perspective of the brass, Sakura is the perfect low-risk, disposable mole in Orochimaru's operation, Shikamaru explains. She's clanless, has no Kekkai Genkai, has an existing connection to Orochimaru through the curse mark, and is absolutely dedicated to following orders to the bitter end. My thought was initially that Tsunade had put her up to it, then took advantage of you being emotionally compromised to send us all after her on a mission doomed to fail that would cover her tracks. Suzuki jolts up, nearly knocking over the board, exclaiming, "Are you serious?" That. Suzuki's eyes shift between Shikamaru and the board as he actually thinks the hypothesis over, then he slowly sinks back down. Actually makes a lot of sense. Shikamaru nods, "Yeah. But aside from your endorsement, when we got back from the mission I confronted her myself. Stupid move, I know, but I hadn't slept in 36 hours and was feeling like a piece of shit, so I thought a bold move was in order. And I got lucky this time, because it actually paid off. Tsunade gave me information." Shikamaru moves a piece and takes Suzuki's lance without looking at the board. Kakashi was the one who found Shino in the middle of that huge forest fire that started a while after we left. All that was in the overall mission report was that he'd gone after us, ran into resistance, and they left him for dead out there. What Kakashi reported is that the forest fire was set according to Leaf procedure for trapping hostiles and erasing material evidence. Kakashi found Shino before any evidence on his body had been destroyed. There were black stains on Shino's jacket nobody had time to identify, beyond them not being blood or soot. Tsunade said that if this is an inside job, if someone from the village had Shino's attacker waiting in the forest to take down our backup, then that jacket would disappear from the hospital without a trace. Suzuki stares at his back row, eyes darting between his king and his generals. Shino got a new jacket after the mission. Yeah, he did, Shikamaru replies, because none of the nurses or orderlies could find his old one when he was discharged. Poof. Gone without a trace. So either Tsunade was gloating about her own cover-up, something she's definitely not stupid enough to do, Suzuki slowly remarks, or this doesn't go all the way to the top, Shikamaru finishes, it goes past the top. Kakashi said the forest fire was Leaf procedure, but considering the ruthlessness of that tactic I'd say it's probably more like Umbu procedure. Umbu is supposed to only answer to the Hokage, but I wouldn't put it past Yuditen or Mito Kato to have their own inroads with them. Suzuki frowns at the board, rubbing at a spot on the center of his forehead. I don't know if I'd peg them as the conspirators. They have the authority, yeah, but unless they're really good actors they seem like they couldn't care less about Sakura herself. They. Suzuki's other hand clenches into a fist. Do you want to know how long any conversation I try to start about retrieving Sakura lasts? 2 minutes. At best. They don't give a shit if she spills village secrets, because they're convinced that there's no way she could even know any. They don't even care if she dies. The only thing they care about is that I care about her, because if I go after her again Orochimaru might snap me up and steal my eyes. They slapped her name in the bingo book and that's the end of it as far as they're concerned. Shikamaru shrugs a shoulder. Remember, they're shinobi, same as any of us. They really could be that good of actors. And like I said, Sakura is a perfect low-risk, disposable mole. The fact that they don't give a shit about her just makes that even more obvious. Though her name already being in the bingo book is more compelling. Even if they were accepting the possibility of her dying by Orochimaru's hand, you'd think they'd try to mitigate her getting killed for the bounty by some rando before she can get them any good, workable information. Suzuki leans his cheek on his fist, staring hard at the shogi pieces. Could it be someone in Umbu itself pulling the strings? Maybe, but that'd be a hard lead to chase all the way down. Shikamaru replies, you and me are adjacent to people who would actually know the identities of high-ranking individuals like squad leaders and the Umbu commander, but we'd get our asses wrecked if we were caught trying to actually find that out ourselves. And with the secrecy that surrounds the whole operation, even if we did rustle up whoever orchestrated it, it'd be too easy for anyone else involved to disavow them as a rogue element playing by their own rules. Suzuki scowls at the board and grumbles, and I still can't tell what all of this has to do with my fucking bank account. Shikamaru takes a few more pieces off Suzuki's side of the board. I don't doubt that officially your account has been locked and their assets have been frozen these last 6 years. I also know that with the police force gone, Umbu has usurped all matters of internal law enforcement in the village. Your clan's case has been the sole jurisdiction of Umbu and the Hokage's office, including the council, since the massacre. When investigating a crime, you need unfettered access to all the information related to the victims. Your clan's account has been locked, sure. But only the front door. The back door has been wide open this whole time. Sasuke's jaw drops. You're saying someone in the tower could have been embezzling from your clan's account this whole time? Shikamaru cuts in, and they'd have all the resources at hand to make it look like nothing had ever happened. Like I said, between Orochimaru having been after your eyes in the first place and the money missing from your account, either the Uchiha clan or you specifically play some role in this. It might turn out that these things aren't related. But going after Sakura almost got all our friends killed. This might get a friend of ours killed, if things go wrong with Sakura. I'm not throwing out a clue until I know for sure it's worthless. Sasuke can't help a bitter little laugh. Well, at least that rules out Tsunade. She didn't even know the Uchiha were all gone until she met me. Shikamaru nods, taking both of Sasuke's generals. Is there anyone else you can think of on the level of the council or the Hokage that could be in on this? I know officially the council is just Yudin and Mito Kato, but I know other old fogies who can't handle retirement would cycle in and out of the conference rooms when the third was in office. Any of them stick out to you? Sasuke's brow furrows, a strange intensity in his eyes for a few tense seconds, before his face relaxes and he shakes his head. No one's jumping right out at me, but I'll keep my eyes open the next time I'm in the tower. He lets his face drop into his hands and groans. God, this is a fucking drag. Shikamaru takes his king and snorts. You're telling me? 7 November, 1000. Any warm feelings coming home to the land of fire's dense forests brings up in Sakura quickly drain from her as Orochimaru leads her southeast, hugging the border with the land of hot water. The land here slowly dips down the closer you get to the ocean, diving below sea level before it's even in sight. The ground turns marshy, threatening to suck you down into the mud and trap you for the great beasts of the swamp to find. Sakura nearly rolls an ankle twice in their journey. Orochimaru travels through the land like she would navigate through her grandmother's house, with ease, familiarity, and a light fondness that brings a quirk to the very edge of his mouth. After 2 days, they're close enough to the ocean that fog rolls off it in the morning, saturating the air with a salty tang. It's almost refreshing, this early in the morning. How it brings visibility down to a foot certainly is not. Some of the swamp trees have given way to limestone spires, but the landscape is no less crowded than it ever was. The mounting sense of unease settling heavy in Sakura's gut doesn't budge. You've been very quiet, little flower, Orochimaru remarks as he strolls through the pre-dawn darkness. Something on your mind? Sakura purses her lips and pushes some hair out of her eyes, taking a long look around. I suppose I'm just wondering how much further we have to go. Orochimaru pauses to shoot a taunting grin over his shoulder at her. Really? You're wondering if we're there yet? Sakura frowns at his back. I was trying to be diplomatic about it, but yes. You said it would take 2 days to get to Ryokai Cave, and this is the morning of day 3. Doubting my sense of direction, are we? Orochimaru wonders with a sing-song lilt coating his voice like caramel. Not at all, Sakura replies, just perhaps wondering if you didn't slightly undersell how long the journey would be. Orochimaru whirls around to walk backwards, putting a hand over his heart in a mock-wounded expression on his face. Does that really sound like something I'd do, little flower? Sakura answers that by frowning deeper and arching a brow. Orochimaru laughs. Rich and dark, my little teacher's pet, you catch on quick as always. But this time I wasn't having fun with you. Ryokai Cave is a KG mistress who guards her secrets jealously. To find her you have to be deliberately seeking her, and to seek her is to accept that your route to her will take as long as she thinks is necessary for you to traverse it. Sometimes it takes 2 days, sometimes 3, sometimes 5. You never know for sure. I simply gave you my best guess. Her bangs fall back into her face and Sakura stubbornly tries to talk and blow them out of her eyes at the same time. So then how do we know if we're there? No answer. Sakura pushes her bangs out of her eyes, and she's utterly alone in the swamp. For a moment, all she can do is try to blink the shock away. The second she does, her stomach does a flip. She immediately reaches out with her chakra sense, trying to ferret out what genjutsu Orochimaru is hiding under, but immediately hits a gigantic bank of chakra. There's chakra all around her, soaked into the marsh, running through the veins of the trees, floating in the fog. It's as if she's suddenly stepped into a gigantic body, its chakra network thrumming around her in time with its heartbeat. Sakura bites her lip and for a moment starts to refine her focus, but stops herself. What good is that going to do? This is Orochimaru's game, this is how all her training has been since the day she arrived, and it's not about to change. He explains something in the vaguest possible terms, then leaves her to sink or swim alone. Whether or not she can decipher his hints is part of the training. Sakura takes a deep breath, stands up straight with her shoulders back, and walks resolutely forward. Ryokai Cave will reveal itself if she seeks it. She keeps that in the center of her mind as the ground beneath her feet slowly starts to firm up from muddy marshland into limestone. The sun has to have risen by now, but the fog shows no signs of burning off. If anything, it's getting thicker. Sakura purses her lips and pushes on. She won't blink, not for Orochimaru and not for the snakes of Ryokai Cave. A breeze whirls in from the east, blowing away a section of the fog to reveal what appears to be a humble temple entrance built into the side of one of the larger limestone spires. The gilding has been worn away by years of salt water damage, but the structure is remarkably well kept. Two massive stone statues of rearing cobras sit on either side of the front steps, their mouths wide open to reveal needle-sharp fangs and long forked tongues. More striking than any of that, however, is the simple presence of a young woman sweeping the porch. She perks up and turns to Sakura with a look of surprise. She's dressed almost like a Miko, but not quite. Her hakama are a deep forest green, her dark hair has been pulled into 3 separate buns, and around her forehead is a delicate golden tiara with 2 green ribbons attached at the temples. On a cord around her neck hangs a jade pendant carved in the shape of a tomo. Sakura can't help the frown that slowly unfolds across her face. The young woman smiles kindly down at Sakura and bows from the waist. "Ah, welcome to Ryokai Cave. You must be a pilgrim seeking the White Snake Sage. I am one of her disciples, Togorium. You look exhausted, poor thing, you must come inside and rest a while." Sakura lets her mouth fall open, slowly replying, "Thank you for your hospitality." She climbs the steps and follows Togorium through the front doors into a dark antechamber lit by a few flickering braziers. Incense burns at the foot of another statue of a rearing cobra, this one monumental in scale and carved from white marble. Sakura is dimly aware that Togorium is saying something about getting her some food, but she's too busy scanning the room. Beyond the statue are 2 hallways that fade into darkness. Togorium disappears down the westernmost hall. The incense has something of a salty scent, not unlike the fog outside, and nothing like Sakura's ever smelled in a temple. Sakura looks to either side of the door for somewhere to put her sandals and doesn't find a shoe rack. Sakura crosses the distance to the 2 incense sticks and intently watches them burn, taking meticulous note of the rate at which the incense shrinks. At just that moment Togorium's voice chirps from down the hall, "You're quite lucky, I found some treats in the pantry." Sakura turns to see Togorium returning to the room, beaming with 2 plates of umbashi and rice in hand. She settles down cross-legged on the floor in front of the statue and beckons Sakura to join her down there. Sakura, for a moment, only stares at the pickled fruit. The umbashi Orochimaru keeps in the storerooms are the sour, salty sort, but these carry the unmistakable scent of honey. Sakura sits across from Togorium and takes the plate. "I'm surprised a temple of ascetics would keep something like this in the pantry," Sakura remarks. Togorium giggles, "Even ascetics need a bit of energy every now and again. Keeping a whole sacred cave system in order is honest work, certainly, but when there are only 3 or 4 of you around at a time to do it, the task is quite fatiguing. The snakes aren't much help, for reasons I imagine should be obvious. Now please, eat. I wouldn't want you to meet the sage on an empty stomach." Sakura's eyes are focused on the plate. After a moment, she lets them slide shut, and takes a deep breath in through her nose. The scent that hits her is absolutely putrid. It's the scent of rotting flesh, rotting fruit, rotting wood, the pure encapsulation of rot. Sakura opens her eyes and glares at Togorium. "You're good at this. But I'm better. Drop the genjutsu and let me pass." Tagorium cocks her head to the side with a concerned tilt to her brows. Whatever do you mean? You must be exhausted from your long journey, poor dear. Shoes aren't allowed inside temples. Sakura cuts her off. Most of them have places for visitors to put their shoes just inside the door. The incense smells like the fog outside, and it's burning too fast. You did almost have me with the umbashi. If I hadn't been suspicious already, I probably would have just given up and taken the opportunity to eat my favorite food again. But it was my favorite food, and that was too perfect a coincidence for me to trust it. Like I said, you're good at this. But I'm better. Let me pass. I won't ask a third time. Tagorium isn't the first thing to break. First, the food on Sakura's plate melts into a black sludge filled with misshapen lumps and wriggling pieces. Sakura shoves the plate off her lap and onto the floor as the firelight flickers out. The floor turns from hardwood to limestone and the monumental snake statue starts to crumble. Tagorium's smile stretches into a misshapen grin, her mouth falling open to reveal sharp fangs and a forked tongue. Her form shifts, limbs retracting, skin shedding to reveal white scales, eyes turning a bright gold with dagger-like pupils. Clever, clever, she hisses, your chakra would have been so delicious, arrogant as you are. You may think you are skilled in genjutsu, but we have the wisdom of centuries behind ours. You are a hatchling who hasn't shed her egg tooth. With a deep, resonant snap, the image of the temple falls away, dropping Sakura into a dripping cave lit only by the faint glow of luminescent crystals jutting out of the ceiling every few yards. Sakura glances over her shoulder in search of the entrance and finds only a winding path disappearing into the dark. She looks back just in time to see the back half of a white snake, speckled with green scales and half the size of Sakura herself, slither into a hole in the wall and disappear. Sakura tentatively takes another look back over her shoulder. To be this deep into the cave system already when it felt like she'd barely stepped through the front door of that temple. Maybe she should have held her tongue. Sakura heads forward, deeper into the cave, but she has a feeling that it wouldn't really matter which direction she went. She finds herself hovering near the wall, fingers dragging along it to keep track of her position in the low light. Through her gloves she can feel the smooth surface, worn down by so much water and the motion of massive snakes that it almost has the finish of chrome. The glow from the crystals twinkles off veins of minerals in the walls, the points of light like stars in a night sky. The tunnels take her on long, winding paths, their shifts in direction and elevation so gradual Sakura stops being able to tell what way she's headed except forward. Periodically she checks to see if she's under the effects of slime mind effect jutsu or anything similar, leaving shuriken lodged into the walls or scoring a small line in the stone with a kunao and waiting to stumble upon them again, but she never does. Keeping track of time becomes next to impossible. She could have been walking for minutes or hours. All she knows is that the ache in her feet has been slowly and steadily getting worse the further she walks. Eventually her path opens up into a larger chamber with glowing crystals covering the ceiling, lighting up the whole room. Geometric crystal shards litter the floor, each no bigger than the palm of her hand. Sakura tentatively steps into the room, eyes running over every inch of it. Once she's at the center, the ground pitches and rumbles beneath her feet. Sakura trips to her knees. As she shoves herself up, slabs of earth a foot thick shoot up and block the two entrances, sealing them up so tight not even air can escape. Sakura looks wildly around before a youthful, female voice chirps, "Well, that's not good." She whirls back to the entrance she came through to see a girl, probably a year or two younger than her, leaning against the barrier blocking her way. Unlike Tagorium, her manner of dress is much more casual, her white and blue robe lacking sleeves and ending far above the knees. Her white sandals resemble those of a gladiator instead of a ninja, her dark hair is up in two buns, her face is framed by a gold tiara and a pair of blue earrings shaped like Tomo. She's resting her chin on her hands, smirking merrily at Sakura. Sakura schools her face into a frown and asks, "And who are you?" She cocks her head to the side with a giggle, "You may call me Ichikashima him. I wouldn't waste much time talking to me if I were you. You have quite a task ahead of you if you want to get out." Sakura's brow furrows and she turns to examine the other exit. The slab of rock covering the way out is covered in geometric divots, each cleanly carved and shaped. She slowly looks down to the pieces of crystal at her feet. At first glance she'd thought them pieces randomly chipped from the chandelier of crystal above, but now that she takes a closer look, they've all been cut into pyramids, diamonds, squares, etc. and etc. Sakura picks up a pyramid-shaped red crystal and holds it up to the door, closing one eye. It would fit perfectly into one of the square divots. "This is really the trial," Sakura remarks, turning back to arch an eyebrow at the girl. "A matching game." Ichikashima Hime throws her head back with a hearty laugh. "Even after walking for so long, you're still full of yourself. Your chakra is going to be even sweeter once it's worn down. Go ahead, try your best. Give it your all. You'll waste away trying to prove your worth." Sakura rolls her eyes and turns away from the girl back to the pieces of crystal on the floor. She pulls a pair of bobby pins out of her weapon pouch and pins her bangs back before settling down on her knees and starting the process of methodically separating the crystal pieces into categories based on their shape. After what feels like 3 hours but was probably 1, Sakura has 10 different piles in front of her, each consisting of around 15 to 20 crystals. She then picks up one crystal from the pyramidal pile and closes one eye. She compares it against the holes, finding about 5 where it would fit. She repeats the process for each shape, this taking what feels like 1 hour but was probably 2. Once Sakura has finished, she laces her fingers under chin and frowns at the door. The gems she has fit all but one of the holes on the door. The remaining hole is a strange shape, a pair of rectangles sitting at a right angle to each other, and is just slightly too small to finagle 2 of the rectangular gems to fit in it without taking any drastic measures. Sakura picks up 2 of the rectangular gems and holds them next to each other. Theoretically, she could maybe adapt an earth-style technique to melt the 2 together, but crystal requires precision even she hasn't mastered to manipulate it, and... Wait. Sakura stands up and crosses the distance to the door. She takes one glove off, reaches out, and places her hand against it. The feeling of stone against her palm is unmistakable, with the same smooth finish as the tunnels beyond. Sakura closes her eyes and takes a deep breath, pulling earth chakra out from the base of her spine. She channels it down through her feet and up and out through her hand. The chakra that leaves her feet pulses through the ground, up into the walls, pooling in the glowing crystals, treating the earth like it's an extension of her body. The chakra that leaves her hand hits open air and dissolves into nothing. Sakura opens her eyes and turns to Ichikashima Hime. "Okay, I'll admit it, that one was a lot better. I don't think I could have tricked every mundane sense at once, especially not as well as you did." Ichikashima Hime frowns and sticks a forked tongue out at Sakura, blowing a raspberry. "You're a big fat cheater, just like little Orochimaru. But you did think outside the box to figure out the trick, so I guess I'll let you go on. I'd like to see you try and cheat Taijutsu." Sakura blinks and Ichikashima Hime has instantly reverted to the form of a white and blue python, the barriers blocking Sakura's path disappearing with her human disguise. The snake slithers quickly out of sight and Sakura is left utterly alone in the chamber. Sakura takes the moment to stretch and quiet her growling stomach with a food pill. After taking an inventory of her weapons and supplies, Sakura sets off further into the cave. She doesn't get far. The chamber is still alight in the distance when a hard weight slams into Sakura's back. The unmistakable piercing pain of snake fangs buries itself in her neck. They pull a pain shriek from her as they withdraw, and a deeper pain shoots through her veins in time with her heartbeat. Her vision blurs and spins, then clears to reveal a woman with fair skin and dark hair towering over her. The woman's hair is pulled into one bun that spills into a ponytail, a golden tiara perched upon her head. She wears the red and white robes of a priestess, with a necklace of 3 red tomo settled around her neck. The woman speaks in a voice that is high yet resonant. "I am Taijutsu. You have slithered your way around Togorium and Ichikashima Hime's trials, but this is not a puzzle to be solved. This is a test of your heart. If you cannot withstand it and your heart breaks, it is mine to consume." Sakura tumbles to her knees, the pins in her hair coming loose and her bangs falling down over her eyes. The pain is nothing like the curse mark. It is oozing and cold, settling heavy wherever it touches and penetrating down to the bone. Sakura grits her teeth, pushing herself up to her knees with one hand and shoving the hair out of her eyes with the other. Standing above her is no longer Taijutsu, but the unmistakable shape of Kakashi. Immediately Sakura starts to whisper he's not real over and over under her breath, but the pain courses down her arms and the look of disappointment in his eye forces her to look down towards his feet. Kakashi's voice is weary as he asks, What's the point of this? How is this getting you any closer to fulfilling your mission? You could have slipped poison into Orochimaru's sake and started slowly poisoning him months ago. Instead here you are, blatantly following in his footsteps. What are you really trying to accomplish? Sakura bites her lip and hisses through her teeth, he's not real, he's not real, he's not real. There's the scuff of sandals on stone and Sakura's eyes are instinctively drawn back behind her. Naruto is glaring down at her, teeth grit in a snarl, eyes blazing red and hands clenched into fists. It's Naruto as she last saw him, as he was the moment before she fired an arrow of yin chakra directly into his heart. He sneers, face it, you didn't take this mission because you care about the Leaf Village. All you've ever wanted is to prove to everyone that you're better than them. That's why you've been treating these spiritual tests of character like they're exam questions with the right answer, because you were just itching to prove that all the time you've spent studying genjutsu was actually worth something. You and Orochimaru are a match made in heaven, Sasuke's voice spits from her left side as Sakura's eyes travel up his legs, past his brace, all the way up to the disdainful glare he shot her way every time she'd fallen short of the standard he and Naruto set. You're both know-it-alls obsessed with learning more, no matter the cost. You've been hurting and killing innocent people on his order so you can stay under his wing. You've been manipulating people who are just as much Orochimaru's prisoners as you are, all in service to your mission. You and Orochimaru treat people like things. On her right Ino appears, shaking with equal parts rage and fear as she snaps, you talk such a big game about doing this for your friends, for the people you love, but you hurt them the worst. You left your mother and Kakashi all alone. You tossed me aside like trash. You broke Sasuke and Naruto down, you fought to kill them, you made Sasuke's leg give out and were ready to drown Naruto. You said horrible things to them, as far as they know you hate them. All they wanted to do was help you and you spat in their faces. Kakashi is gone and Gaara stands above her, cold eyes staring at her from either side of the scar she gouged through his face. You rake them both across the coals for being reckless and stupid, but you're worse than them both combined. You feel it, don't you? The curse mark eats away at your mind. When you use it you act like an animal. The more you've used it the more short-sighted, the more aggressive, the more arrogant you've become. It's a curse. And you're utterly addicted to it. What will happen when you accomplish your mission? The Leaf Village will want to finally get rid of it or seal it off indefinitely. You'll be stuck with your own meager chakra reserves, your own skinny body, things you've barely worked on fixing with training because why train when the curse mark can do everything for you? Naruto is gone, and her mother's voice is exhausted, exasperated, at the end of her rope with this girl who just won't listen. What do you even want, Sakura? What comes after Orochimaru dies? What comes after you come home a hero? Do you just settle down as the next matriarch of the Uchiha? Do you become a Jonin and teach Genin for the rest of your life? Do you use the skills you learned here to join Umbu and manipulate and assassinate yet more innocent men and women who just want to live lives where they don't have to worry about starving? How can you even go back to the Leaf Village after what you've seen here? Sakura looks up. All the people she knows are gone. A face she has only seen in photographs stares back at her. Rin is her height, thin but not as dangerously, worryingly skinny as Sakura is now. She stands up straight, not as a posture put on to make people think she knows her purpose, but the natural result of certainty and determination. A voice Sakura has only ever imagined asks, "Who are you, Sakura Haruno?" Sakura feels like she's turning to stone as the pain permeates her body down to her cells. She wants to cry, but realizes after blinking that she already has been. She stares down at her hands as they brace against the ground, desperately straining to keep her upright. Her body is shivering violently, like she's out in the middle of a blizzard. Everything they've said is no more and no less than what creeps into her mind every night as she lies in the darkness of her room on her cot, staring at the ceiling. Of course it is. This is genjutsu, it turns the mind and the heart against themselves. Her mind and her heart turn on her every time she lets the doubt seep in. So how does she always break that spell? Sakura closes her eyes and goes back to the moment that brought her here. She remembers biting down hard on the side of her tongue, the tang of blood filling her mouth. She remembers the burn, the ache of the muscles in her legs as she forced them forward, running gracelessly but with all the passion, all the fury and speed her skinny little body could hold, to protect one of the few fixed points in her world. Sakura opens her mouth and quietly replies, I know that every single thing I've done, that I've endured, that I've given up, it's all been for love. And I believe. I have to believe that a life lived with love and with courage is one that will end, however it ends, without regret. There's a long silence, punctuated only by the sound of water dripping from the ceiling. The voice that breaks it belongs to Taijutsuem, so there is something strong inside you. You may be our most interesting pilgrim yet. The seeping, freezing pain disappears as quickly as it arrived. Sakura slowly lifts her head and looks around. There was no fade, no flicker, no skip. One moment she was in a narrow, damp tunnel, the next she's in a massive, excavated cavern lit by enough crystals and torches to make it seem bright as daylight. Rows of stone tablets covered in ancient writings flank a walkway leading to a temple entrance flush against the rock wall, the very mirror image of the illusion Sakura entered through. Togorium and Ichikashimahime kneel on either side of the massive doors, heads bowed, eyes closed, hands folded in their laps. Taijutsuem stands on the front steps, smiling down at Sakura, you have passed our 3 trials. The White Snake Sage awaits you within the temple. I will leave you with a piece of advice. A strength can easily become a weakness if it is used on the wrong battlefield. Consider your weapon carefully before you draw it. Now go. The sage will become impatient if you dawdle. Sakura drags herself up to her feet. She feels like she just came out of a fight for her life, and if Taijutsuem was being serious about eating her broken heart, that isn't so far off the mark. Sakura climbs the steps to the double doors and pulls herself through them, stepping into a dimly lit chamber that smells of clove and cedar wood. At the head of another set of steep stairs is a massive stone throne carved in the shape of a coiled dragon. The first 10 coils of the White Snake Sage's body lie draped across the throne. Her tail winds throughout the room, piled on top of itself, looping around and disappearing off into darkness. The sage adorns herself with gold bands around her tail, an emerald pendant easily the size of a boulder, a bejeweled black turban and an orange head dress. Clenched in her jaw is a massive cigarette holder with the source of the clove scent burning at its end. Sakura immediately drops to her knees and bows so low her forehead touches the floor, It's an honor to meet you, Your Holiness. The laugh that emanates from the White Snake Sage is dry and rattling, like the sound of dead leaves crunching underfoot. Where were these manners when you faced Togorium and Ichikashimahime? I ought to eat you for being so two-faced, hatchling. Sakura feels an embarrassed flush spread up her neck all the way to her forehead. Why, you would be within your rights to do so, Your Holiness. I didn't show this place and its inhabitants the respect they deserved. Taijutsuem reminded me of my place, and I beg your forgiveness. Another rattling laugh, this one with a warmth to it. Get up off the floor, hatchling, you've made your point. I hardly expected you to be humble. Your students never are, Orochimaru. Sakura rises back to a sitting position just in time to see Orochimaru emerge from behind the White Snake Sage's throne. It's rare to see a naked, unvarnished emotion on Orochimaru's face, at least when he's sober. And now he's staring at her in pure, unadulterated shock. A section of the White Snake Sage's tail undulates out and bumps Orochimaru's back, knocking him slightly off balance. What's the matter, boy? You expected her to make it, didn't you? Orochimaru shoots a quick glare up at her, but doesn't respond. He makes his way carefully down the staircase to Sakura, eventually stopping right in front of her. He kneels down, offering his arms. Sakura takes them, letting Orochimaru help her back to her feet. He doesn't let go. His expression is complicated. He's not smiling, his lips are pursed, but there's something bright in his eyes. He opens his mouth a few times, but no sound comes out, and he has to close it again and look away for another moment. Finally, he murmurs, I'm impressed. You did quite well to make it here. Sakura can only stare at him, mouth hanging open. That's the first compliment he's paid her that wasn't coated in a thick glaze of mockery or a damnation through faint praise. She lets herself smile. Thank you, sir. Now, the White Snake Sage booms, snapping them both out of the moment. Come forth, Sakura Harino. It's time for you to sign the contract, and for us to see what kind of summoner you become. Sakura's eyes are wide, locked on the giant snake that looms above her, surrounds her, threatens to constrict her. Orochimaru gives her arm a gentle squeeze, the most reassurance he's ever given her. Sakura bows at the waist, "It would be my honor, your holiness." Chapter 5, Winter 2. 21, December, 1000. Kakashi winces as Sasuke pulls the bottle of root beer from the drink case. "Really?" Sasuke shoots a lukewarm glare over at Kakashi and replies, "Got a problem with it?" "Several, many, dozens," Kakashi replies. "How? Why?" "It's good," Sasuke protests, dropping the bottle in the shopping basket. "I also don't know how it's a surprise. I get it all the time, it's always in the fridge." "Is it? You must be putting it on my blind side," Kakashi muses, artfully stepping around the real reason it's a surprise. "Or maybe I just expected better from you, young man." "Such a disappointment." Sasuke rolls his eyes. "What's disappointing is all the takeout you eat. You are an adult, right? You should cook like one." This time all Kakashi does is hum in a vague gesture of acknowledgement. There's only one response to that and they both know it. Kakashi could cook, in theory, but that would necessitate spending more time in the apartment. And Kakashi is very good at making himself scarce. He has to be taking literally every mission he's offered, for how often he's gone. Sasuke has to wonder if the real reason he was moved into Kakashi's place in the aftermath of Sakura's defection was to act as a glorified dog-sitter. Sasuke shoves a sigh out through his nose. It's winter solstice. The whole reason they're here is so they can focus on celebrating the holiday properly and pretend like nothing's wrong. That's what holidays are for. So he deflects, "All right, what else do we need?" Kakashi rustles up the list Sasuke scribbled on the back of a receipt and reads, "Glutinous rice, sweet ginger syrup, and, you literally just wrote shit to put in the balls." Sasuke flinches. "I did." "You did," Kakashi sighs. "We are completely out of our depth here, aren't we?" "We should have brought Pakun," Sasuke grumbles. "He's more competent than both of us put together." A warm, feminine voice chuckles from behind them, "Well, I'm not a dog, but hopefully I'll do in a pinch." Sasuke jumps and Kakashi turns easily to the source. Tsubaki Harino is smirking mostly at Kakashi, mauve hair pulled up and away to counterbalance the large scarf around her neck and a shopping basket balanced in the crook of her elbow. Sasuke finds his throat going dry. He hasn't spoken to Sakura's mother since before Sakura left. He's seen her around, certainly, but every time she's even gotten close to looking his way he's gone sprinting in the other direction. What do you even say to a woman whose daughter you let run away to be an international criminal? If Kakashi's any indication, you smile beneath your mask and sigh, "You're a lifesaver, Tsubaki. Did we catch you en route to the Nohara winter solstice feast?" Tsubaki rolls her eyes and bumps Kakashi with her hip as she effortlessly takes the lead, "And listen to my uncle from T-Country tell me exactly how he feels about divorce and single motherhood? Gag me. So, have the two of you made Tang-Yuan before?" Kakashi and Sasuke in perfect harmony go to scratch at the back of their necks and mumble something vague to the effect of, "Well, it was a long time ago," or, "I mean I was kind of young when," in a vain attempt to dance around the incredibly depressing facts of their lives. Tsubaki watches them for a few moments before chuckling into her hand, "I see. You need more help than I thought. All right, follow me, and do take notes. This will be on the test." Sasuke turns on his Sharingan and Tsubaki lets out a bewildered, coughing laugh, "Not like that." Tsubaki lets Sasuke and Kakashi know exactly how out of their depth they were by grabbing the ingredients to make sweet ginger syrup instead of some sort of pre-packaged, pre-made version of it. She knows exactly where everything is in the store without having to scan the aisle labels and can somehow tell the difference between identical-looking ginger roots just by picking them up. She asks them if they'd prefer black sesame or red bean filling and Sasuke's response of, "Whichever is less sweet," earns him an incredulous look and Tsubaki grabbing both. Once she's gotten everything for Tang-Yuan she starts getting extra helpings of the ingredients she already had in her shopping basket, because of course Sasuke and Kakashi are joining her for dinner. When was that ever in doubt? As they stand in line for the checkout counter with her, Kakashi leans in and whispers, "Before you ask, yes, she's always like this." Sasuke opens his mouth, but nothing comes out. He isn't sure what's more confusing, Sakura's mother sweeping them into a winter solstice dinner with next to no prompting, or that Kakashi knows her well enough that he's not surprised by it. Any trepidation Suzuki feels being in Sakura's house for the first time in over a year is shoved away by Tsubaki, immediately putting him to work. She ropes Kakashi into helping her prepare the ingredients for hot pot on her left and directs Suzuki through the process for making tangyuan on her right. Suzuki follows her instructions for making the fillings almost to the letter, only deviating to put half the recommended dose of powdered sugar in the black sesame filling. The hospital has gotten Suzuki used to juggling 1,000 tasks at once, so he quickly finds a rhythm. When the rice dough needs to sit he goes back to the ginger syrup, when that needs to sit he works on a filling, and when that needs a rest he's back to the rice dough. Beyond listening for Tsubaki's instructions and corrections, the world outside what Suzuki needs to do in the next 5 minutes falls into the background, blurred and muffled. Before he knows it he's dropping the last of the tangyuan in a pot of boiling water, then leaning back on the table and letting out a long breath. Tsubaki smiles over at him and remarks, "They look good. We still need the sink down here, so why don't you go ahead and wash up in the bathroom? It's upstairs at the end of the hall." Kakashi's eye crinkles at the corner as he asks, "Does this mean I get a break too?" Tsubaki grins and points at him with the knife in her hand, "Just a short one. You are nowhere near done, mister." Something about watching them banter makes Suzuki mutter a quick, "Yeah, okay, be back in a second," and dart out of the kitchen without a second look. He flies up the stairs and down the hall, locking himself in the bathroom and taking his time washing his hands. As he stares at the water he lets his mind wander, always a bad idea. Tsubaki was getting the ingredients for hot pot before she found them, but she said she wasn't going to eat with her family. Either she was going to subject herself to an evening of her family talking around the fact that her daughter was missing and blew it off for just 2 people doing that, or she was going to have a meal for a group by herself. Suzuki shuts his eyes and splashes water on his face. He starts making his way out of the bathroom and back down to the first floor. Suzuki pauses midway down the stairs when he hears Kakashi's voice, clearer than ever, asking softly, "So, how are you holding up?" Suzuki's feet put down roots in the stairs. Kakashi's mask is off. He, Naruto, and Sakura once wasted a week and a half trying to get that thing off him. He's halfway through an invisible cloak jutsu when he hears Tsubaki's answering chuckle. It's a raw, ragged thing, like the words alone put her on the edge of tears. Suzuki is frozen mid-hand sign. Tsubaki replies, "If you were anyone else, Kakashi." "Sorry," he breathes, "I imagine you get that question enough these days." Suzuki slowly lets his hands fall to his sides. He settles down on the stair and leans his head against the wall, closing his eyes. He feels like he's 8 years old again, listening in on his parents talking in hushed whispers about Itaki acting out more and more. "It's not that they're asking, it's how they're asking," Tsubaki snaps, the sound of her chopping vegetables coming to a stop. "They're asking it like they did after Rin, after the divorce. The worst part about it isn't even that they've all given up on Sakura. They have, Kakashi, you know they have, don't give me that look." "I wasn't about to argue," Kakashi replies, "her name's in the bingo book, I know for a fact they've given up on her." Everything is silent for a few moments before Tsubaki growls through gritted teeth, "The way people talk to me. It's like they're not even surprised. Like it's just habit to pity me for losing people, like that's just who I'm always going to be. I'm not their neighbor or their seamstress or even that shithead teenager who would go around putting firecrackers in the mailboxes of the clan compounds. I'm just the woman who gets left behind." There's the sound of chair legs scraping on a wood floor. There are no footfalls, but Suzuki can hear the sound of rustling fabric. There's the sound of something being set down on the wooden cutting board, and Tsubaki letting out a shuddering sigh. He doesn't want to put the sounds together into a picture, but human instinct makes him do it anyway. Kakashi at the very least is at her side, maybe with an arm around her shoulders. From the muffled sound of Tsubaki's breathing, he's probably closer than that. A long moment passes before Tsubaki asks, "I'm sure you're just as sick of the question as I am, but it's only fair, how are you holding up?" A groan from Kakashi, the sound of skin hitting skin, and his voice is briefly muffled when he replies, "It's like. Do you ever just feel yourself falling into bad patterns, and by the time you think you should be doing something about them you're already back in the deepest part of the rut?" Every morning I keep telling myself today is the day I'm going to stop isolating myself and maybe I'll spend the day training with Sasuke or fucking around with Guy or something, but then I blink and I've taken another mission near the land of sound. It's a miracle I'm even here today. It's only gotten worse now that Sasuke's a Chunin, hasn't it? Sabeki murmurs, not even pretending it's a question. Exponentially, Kakashi sighs, I thought. I was so sure I'd outgrown this. I thought I was done chasing shadows and trying to force solutions when they aren't going to come and throwing myself into combat so I don't have to think about all the progress I'm not making and I thought I was ready to step up and be the fucking adult for once but I just keep letting these kids down. Sasuke needs me now, Sakura needed me before, Naruto's always needed me and I keep pawning them off to other people or just letting them run loose and I thought I was better than this. Trust me, Sabeki murmurs with a sound like a hand rubbing fabric, grief has a way of making us all devolve into younger, worse versions of ourselves. I mean, you remember when you broke the news to me a year ago? I turned right back into that girl too angry and self-centered to realize slapping one of the most powerful ninja in the village might be a bad idea. Kakashi lets out a choked laugh, oh god don't call me that. I'm nowhere near that good, are you kidding me? Civilian, remember? I have no sense of scale, Sabeki snickers, an academy student's as dangerous to me as the Hokage. And as far as I'm concerned you're the most dangerous man in Fire Country. Orochimaru should be quaking in his boots. You're terrible at flattery, Kakashi remarks, barely suppressed laughter in his voice. Swizen said the same thing all the time, Sabeki shoots back playfully, it was one of his grievances during the divorce, didn't stroke my ego enough. Wasn't the only thing he thought I didn't stroke enough, of course. Kakashi is laughing from the belly now, trying and mostly failing to speak through the laughter, you're terrible, you have a child, you're a grown woman. He devolves into more breathless laughter and Sabeki laughs breezily along with him. Sasuke opens his eyes by a fraction, staring through his eyelashes at the light at the bottom of the stairs. After the laughter peters out Sabeki speaks again, her tone warm and resolute. She is coming back, Kakashi. Whether that means she comes home on her own or you have to drag her back. I believe that. I wish I had that kind of faith, Kakashi murmurs, if I did, maybe I'd be here more often instead of constantly trying to chase her down. Well, try to be here right now, she replies, little steps, Kakashi. They're all we can take. Yeah, he whispers, and Sasuke's sure he's saying something else, but with another rustle of clothes it's muffled again. Sasuke stays on the stair, temple pressed to the wall, and keeps waiting. He waits until the silence breaks and the sounds of cooking fill the first floor of the house, the smell of soy sauce, sugar, and mirin wafting up the stairs and surrounding him. And then he waits some more. He waits until he hears Sabeki call, Sasuke, dinner's almost ready. You all right up there? Sasuke forms a few hand signs, and when he opens his mouth his voice comes from further up the stairs, yeah, fine, I'm coming. He pauses for a moment, then stands up and walks the rest of the way down to the kitchen. Kakashi, mask back in place, jokes about him hiding up there to get out of having to help cook with that look in his eye he always gets when he's seen right through him. Sasuke just deflects by sitting down at the kitchen table and asking Sabeki how close to ready almost means. The three of them feast on the best hot pot Sasuke's ever had, Sabeki asking Sasuke question after question about his work at the hospital and Kakashi eating from behind a fabric catalog because Sabeki forbade Ika paradise at the table. Sasuke tells her only the nice stories, only the lives saved and the weird complaints at the clinic and the births he's had to assist with. Kakashi doesn't talk any shop, instead sharing anecdotes about Guy's challenges and cute things Pakun did when he was a puppy. Sabeki shares only the mundane civilian gossip she's picked up at work, even though a seamstress for ninja probably has to repair her fair share of blood-stained clothes. They have the tang yuan for dessert. They're sweet, but bearable, and Sasuke eats as many of them as he can stomach. Then he eats a few more. He spends the whole night pretending nothing's wrong, because that's what holidays are for. 27 January, 1001. Orochimaru's eyes roam across the lab as he remarks, doing some independent research, are we? Sakura nearly leaps out of her skin, whirling away from one of the whiteboards she's colonized with all manner of loose-leaf documents pinned up by magnets. She's quickly running out of space for her to write chemistry equations, draw Punnett squares, and scribble near illegible comments. By Sakura's standards, this room is a complete mess. The unspooled scrolls and open books are only organized in alphabetical order on the tables they've been isolated to. She's even gone as far as to drag one of the microfiche readers all the way from the archives and plant it in the corner with a whole case of microfilm. Sakura opens her mouth just in time for a puff of smoke to burst into being right above her. A little white pit viper curled around another scroll falls out of the smoke and into Sakura's waiting hands. The snake trades the scroll for winding around Sakura's wrist. Sakura looks from the snake to the scroll and finally back to Orochimaru. I can explain. Orochimaru's chuckle comes out far warmer than he intends as he wades deeper into the controlled chaos. I'm sure you can. He meanders over to the nearest whiteboard and schemes its contents. His eyebrows leap up when he finds a page of his own lab notes on the experiments he conducted with Hashirama's cells back in the Leaf Village, surrounded by Sakura's own notes in dry erase marker, of course. Well now, Orochimaru remarks, stepping back and tapping the notes with his knuckles, I knew you were ambitious, but I didn't think you'd go shooting for the moon quite this early. Sakura blows a couple locks of hair out of her eyes and replies, I mean, that's not exactly what I'd been digitizing most of the material we had on the first Hokage in wood style already, and since I had to read it all I got to thinking about it, and after a little bit I just started thinking that. Sakura's eyes dart this way and that, like she's looking to see who's listening, before blurting out, either the first was an alien or a liar, because there's no natural physical way wood style should work like people say it does. Orochimaru blinks several times, wide-eyed, before turning and leaning his hip against one of the tables with a sigh. An alien, maybe not, but certainly a freak of nature. I've seen his cells, little flower, that man was an anomaly the likes of which we'll probably never see again. Yeah, but, Sakura cuts in, eyes now wide and bright, but that's just it. I don't think anyone's really considered exactly how he's an anomaly, because nobody really thinks about how combination elemental style Kekkai Genkai work. Like, think about it, why are these styles Kekkai Genkai at all? Like, in theory anyone who masters the two styles that make it up should be able to at least get started on learning one of the combination styles, right? People can learn and master any of the elemental styles, some are just harder than others based on your natural affinities, so why not these? Orochimaru arches a brow and cocks his head ever so slightly to one side. Don't think you're the first to ask that question, little flower. Sakura frowns and lets out a puff of exasperated air. I know I'm not. Why do you think I have all this stuff out? I've been looking through all the scholarship we have, trying to see if anyone's proposed the same hypothesis I have, and nobody has. Really? Orochimaru laughs, a bold claim, dear. You had my interest, now you have my attention. Sakura's whole face lights up. Orochimaru watches her pin her hair back and race around the room, pulling all the whiteboards together so her notes are all in one place. He's seen her driven. He's seen her focused and attentive and proud. He's never seen her excited like this. It radiates out from her, filling the whole room up to the ceiling. He almost wants to say she's blooming, but perhaps that'd be a bit much. Once she's pulled all the boards together, Sakura whirls around and launches in, okay, so, most of the time when discussing how chakra natures work and trying to describe how combination natures happen, people talk about it in terms of it being a matter of instinct. Someone with the Kekkai Genkai just whips it out in a burst of adrenaline, then can start practicing with it once they know they have it, because they know how to get to it again. And for some incredibly gifted people, yeah, that's true, but think about it. I needed help to find out what my chakra nature even was, and I bet you did too, right? Orochimaru nods. Most clanless or minor clan ninja need to have their nature tested, that's true. Exactly, so why is it that the clan ninja with these Kekkai Genkai are different? They aren't, Sakura continues, darting over to another whiteboard. If they were left to their own devices they'd need to get that tested like anyone else, but the clans have generations of experience under their belt that tells them it's a 60% chance or better what their children's chakra nature will be. They're probably checking at birth just to be sure, and just like clan kids come into the academy with extra training from family to boost them up, these clans with these Kekkai Genkai come in already knowing their chakra natures and the basics of how to knead chakra into their element. Sakura leaps over to one of her Punnett squares and points to it as she rattles on, and, these ninja, these clans, Generally what comes with a Kekii Genkai is some kind of physical abnormality, whether it's something as huge as the Hojiki ability to just melt or something as subtle as the Shari-nan. But as far as we know there's nothing like that in the combination styles, except maybe some kind of mutation in the chakra network, but when those have been documented they usually affect chakra control and capacity. Which I mean, that actually kind of helps my point, but no, back on topic. Orochimaru blinks. I wasn't aware we hopped off. Sakura talks and redoes one of her chemistry equations at the same time. If there's no obvious physical abnormality and there's no abnormalities in the chakra network, which, of course, we can't be sure there aren't, then it stands to reason there's only one actual difference on a physical level between a ninja without one of these Kekii Genkai and one with it. They're born with two elemental affinities, and what does having an elemental affinity get you? Well, beyond a susceptibility to the opposing element that can be downplayed through training and equipment, considering it doesn't lock you out of learning any of the other elements, all it really does is make learning the basics easier. It's like any other talent. When the basics are easy, practicing is fun, and when practicing is fun you can ramp up the intricacy and complexity at a faster rate than someone who struggles with the basics. Sakura whirls around and slaps her open palm on the center of the whiteboard. So what I'm getting at is that combination natures aren't a matter of physical difference or instinct or character. They're a matter of time and privilege and control. All the Kekii Genkai grants is being born with two natural affinities, so they have a much easier time mastering both, and that gives them a head start on the chakra control required to mold their chakra into the component elements, then mold them back together into the combination element and then form that into a technique. For most ninja, doing all of that would require years of training to learn how in an hour to actually perform, but clans with these Kekii Genkai have been working on the style for centuries, so they have expediting that process down to a science. Anyone should be able to use any combination style, even wood. Isn't that crazy? Orochimaru's eyes have gone wide, and it takes him a few moments to reply, crazy indeed. I enjoy a good iconoclastic hypothesis as much as the next scientist. But if this is the case, then I still don't see why the first Hokage is the only person we know of to use wood style. Sakura's shoulders sink a bit as she turns back to her work. I'm still working on that. I think I can answer at least why he was able to use it to the extent he did. From what I've read, it sounds like his chakra reserves were absolutely massive, and he had this life force that was just insane. He could sleep off injuries that force people into retirement at best, kill them at worst. The rock assassins that did him in had to collapse an entire mountain range on him and then decapitate him when he crawled out of the rubble. Wood style is different from the other combination styles in that you're creating something that's alive, so like. Sakura waves a frustrated hand through the air. Life needs things to live, and if you're gonna just summon a full-grown tree out of nowhere, you become the thing that gives it life. The first could create forests and gigantic goddess statues because he had enough life force and chakra to spare to do it. So that's my working theory as to how he can do so much, and as for him being the only. That's why I'm ready to call the first a liar, because I don't think for a second he was the only one. Maybe we can't find anyone going forward with the Kekii Genkai, but if we look back. Sakura goes quiet for a moment, then throws her head back with a massive sigh, and that's where I'm stuck. Orochimaru can't help an incredulous laugh. That's where you're stuck. Yeah, Sakura exclaims, throwing her hands up. Between clans guarding their secrets with their lives and village archives always being the first things hit when they fall under siege in a war, the historical record turns into a spotty mess before the founding of the Leaf Village. The Senju clan is too scattered and watered down for any word about them after the founding of the village to be worth much, but if we had historical evidence and precedent to work with. Sakura slaps her hands against her forehead and drags them down her face, groaning, it's no use. Any facility that'd have that kind of information is underguard too heavy to break through. This is the end of the line. Orochimaru slides in next to her and points to the snake around her wrist. Isn't that what these little ones are for? Sakura frowns as she runs a finger along the back of the snake. Well, I mean, to an extent, yeah. But you know the snakes, even the big ones, are really literal-minded. You have to know exactly what you need and know for sure it'll be small enough for them to carry before sending them off. I only sent this little guy out because I've checked this scroll out of the Leaf Library so many times I could describe it in my sleep. Orochimaru gasps, leaning back like he's about to faint. You stole from the library. Oh my dear, I knew I was a terrible influence on you, but you've gone much too far. What kind of monster have I raised? Sakura holds up her hand and the little viper lashes out to bite for Orochimaru's wrist. He whips it out of the way and cuffs Sakura on the back of the head, knocking her bangs loose from their pins. Sakura mutters an apology and Orochimaru grins at her ever-increasing cheek. He pushes off the table and makes the rounds of Sakura's research. She isn't wrong about that kind of historical precedent being a nightmare to assemble. Any knowledge of the deeper past the Warring States period didn't eradicate in its 2 centuries of rampant violence is hoarded by the villages like a dragon hoards gold. Ninja historians may claim that history began with the Sage of Six Paths, but it might as well begin with Hashirama Senju. Anything before him is so scattered and abstract it's as good as myth. Considering so much modern knowledge of Ninshu, the sage, and his descendants comes from scrolls squirreled away in the temples of the tailed beasts for the 900 years before their escape, it might just be myth. And a light bulb goes off above Orochimaru's head. Sakura, my dear, Orochimaru trills, turning to her with a grin. As always you show a penchant for thinking inside every single corner and seam of the box, but never even considering the outside. Tell me, little flower, what other places beyond the hidden villages would have interest in the past as it pertains to ninjutsu and the working of chakra? Just as he predicted she would, Sakura stares at him like he just asked her to describe what the inside of the moon looks like. Orochimaru takes Sakura by the shoulders and shakes her as he cackles, Ninshu temples. Ninshu monasteries. The religion was revived by scrolls hidden in the tailed beasts' temples, who's to say they aren't sitting on even more? What more secure place to keep your records than in a place meant to be sacred, filled with a whole class of people trained in the art of manipulating chakra who have nothing better to do than be on guard at all times. Sakura grabs his arms to steady herself, stammering, why Yuri? Actually yeah, you're right, but that just means they're also really well guarded. Orochimaru wags a finger in her face, little flower. You forget how complacent people can get when they live in peace and isolation for generations. That doesn't just apply to the monks, that applies to anyone else trying to sack their compounds. If the monks are expecting anything, it's a full frontal assault by people trying to overpower them with brute force. They won't be expecting an infiltrator using genjutsu, now will they? Sakura's eyes go wide. You want me to? I will, but can I'll need a team. If you let me assemble a team I can guarantee you I can do it. The fact that Orochimaru's impulse is to say yes makes his blood run cold. He pulls his mouth into a sneer. This is training, Sakura. And you won't learn anything if you lean on others. You won't be getting a team. You'll be getting a handler, to make sure you don't stray too far. Sakura's shoulders sink. That's... Yes, sir. Orochimaru reaches out and runs a finger along the spine of the viper on her wrist, and besides, you're a snake summoner now, little flower. We're never really alone, are we? Sakura looks down at her feet. No, we aren't, sir. Orochimaru tips her chin up so he can look her in the eye. She probably thinks that she's hidden that spark of defiance somewhere deep and dark, but it burns as bright as a wildfire. Orochimaru grins as his stomach turns and hisses, there's a good girl. 25, February, 1001. Lee winds the last of the linen wrappings around his wrist with a smile. All right, everyone remembers the rules. Sasuke rolls his eyes as he rolls his shoulders. No sherry non. Niji tucks a few flyaway strands of hair into his high and tight bun. No Byakugan. And no gates. Lee finishes, smile widening out to a grin as he slides into his ready stance. If your back hits the floor and stays there for 10 seconds, you are out. We start on the count of 3. 1. Niji drops into his stance. 2. Sasuke takes a deep breath in, then surges towards Niji with a shout of 3. Sasuke's whirling roundhouse kick clips the side of Niji's head as he jolts up and out of reach, swerving around both jabs that come after. He whirls back in and answers with a palm thrust and 2 precise strikes for bundles of chakra points on Sasuke's neck. Sasuke easily bobs and weaves around all 3 strikes. Before he has the chance to jeer something about a medic never getting hit, he feels a rush of wind behind him and ducks beneath a high kick from Lee. Lee goes low as Sasuke's popping back up, sweeping his ankles and knocking Sasuke off his feet. He was taught that a medic should never get hit. But Sasuke has two teachers, and the other one taught him to turn every hit the opponent scores against them. Sasuke shifts his weight mid-fall. The second his shoulders hit the ground he spins his body around, legs whirling in a wide circle, lightning chakra surging around them in bolts and sparks. They connect with a loud crackle, knocking Neji back and sending Lee sprawling into a half-melted snowdrift. Sasuke flips himself upright just in time to see Neji pull a practice brick wall up from the dirt. With a burst of physical force and compressed chakra, Neji sends the wall rocketing across the ground straight at Sasuke. Sasuke pulls chakra into his arms and redirects the excess into his feet. When the wall hits, Sasuke catches it. He skids back several inches, the chakra in his feet not quite enough to anchor him, then punches straight through the wall. The force of the blow sends rubble flying like shrapnel from a grenade. In the split second Sasuke uses to shield his eyes from the flying bits of rock he's grabbed from behind. Lee flips Sasuke around and forces him down onto his back, pinning him with a knee on his stomach and a hand on his chest. He brings up his free hand and strikes twice at Sasuke's face. Sasuke bobs around them both. Lee cracks the ground with the force of his blows. Sasuke leverages his core and his legs to shift his weight and flips them again, putting Lee on his back. He channels lightning chakra down his arm and into his fingers. He pokes both of Lee's shoulders, the lightning coursing through his nerve endings and temporarily disrupting the electrical impulses. Lee's arms both fall limp at his sides. Sasuke doesn't get to take advantage of that. From the corner of his eye he just barely catches Neji finishing a round of hand signs and making a sweeping motion with his arm. The entire snowdrift behind Sasuke surges up like a tidal wave and crashes into him, knocking him off of Lee and sending him tumbling away. Sasuke scrambles out of the snow, lightly bruised and soaking wet. He grits his teeth. If he uses any more lightning-style techniques like this he'll do just as much damage to himself as his opponents. He calls over to Neji, "You're an asshole, you know that." Neji grins, "Takes one to know one." Sasuke can't form a witty response to that, not when Lee is leaping to his feet and proclaiming, "This is nothing. I train with my arms bound all the time, it will take more than this to stop me." Lee running with his arms flapping uselessly behind him like ribbons would be a comical image if it wasn't followed up by Lee pulling his leg up like a flamingo and kicking to knock Sasuke's head off his shoulders. Sasuke swerves around his lightning-fast foot, teeth grit and eyes wide. "Shouldn't have agreed to train with both of you," Sasuke grouses, "I knew you'd gang up on me." Sasuke concentrates chakra in the sole of his foot and stomps the ground. It doesn't come out as pure, earth-shattering force, but instead a burst of flame that sends Neji and Lee leaping back and dries Sasuke off. Neji lands ankle-deep in another snowdrift. He races through a hand signs and bright blue water chakra sloughs off of him, into the slush. The snow rises up around him and separates into loosely held together balls, each the size of a fist. Neji throws out several empty palm thrusts and with each one a slush ball goes flying towards Sasuke. Sasuke drops to his stomach and all of them smack Lee in the chest. Lee glares at Neji and jukes around Sasuke so he's in between the two of them. He throws a pair of butterfly kicks, one cracking Neji across the jaw and the other barely missing Sasuke's chin. As Lee lands on his feet and his arms swing to dangle in front of him he flexes his fingers, then his elbows, then his shoulders. The technique's worn off, and now Lee is twice as dangerous. Sasuke channels lightning chakra down his arms and throws two jabs, one for Neji's cheekbone and one for Lee's forehead. Neji sighs zero in on a point beneath Lee and Sasuke's jaws before thrusting his fingers like spears right for them. Lee lobs a pair of good, old-fashioned body blows at both of his sparring partners. All three screech to a halt. Neji's fingertips are an inch away from Sasuke and Lee's throats. The lightning crackling around Sasuke's hands shines in Lee and Neji's eyes. Lee's fists are exactly 1 inch away from Sasuke and Neji's stomachs, and they both know an inch is all he needs. The three stare at each other, breath heaving, hearts racing, eyes wide. "Okay," Sasuke wheezes, "here's the deal. On the count of 3, we all back off and call this round a draw." Lee bobs his head in a shallow nod, 1. Neji keeps his eyes locked on their hands, 2. 3. All three of them drop their hands to their sides. Sasuke lets the moment sit for exactly 1 second before whipping his leg around and slamming his shin into Neji's side with a burst of chakra he'd been building up all fight. Niji goes flying into Lee and they both sail all the way across the garden and through the back wall of the Hyuga compound. Suzuki grins at the quickly clearing cloud of dust and rubble and strolls through the hole easily done, considering it's at least 5 feet across. Niji and Lee are lying on their backs, Niji groaning through grit teeth and Lee coughing up all the dust he'd swallowed. Suzuki places his hands on his hips and counts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I win. Niji doesn't respond with words. He responds by narrowing his eyes and, quick as a cobra, sitting up and jabbing his fingers into the upper left quadrant of Suzuki's abdomen. Suzuki shouts out a swear in time with his spleen rupturing. What the fuck, Niji? Niji just smirks. Now it's a draw. After dusting themselves off, the 3 boys settle down on the Branch Manor's back porch, Lee and Niji taking grateful gulps of bottled water while Suzuki casually works on mending the damage Niji did to his spleen. Lee smiles over at the 2 of them and chirps, I am impressed. Your forms have been improving, especially since we started implementing the no dojutsu rule. Suzuki rolls his eyes and uses his free elbow to jab a bruise on Lee's shoulder. You know, we're both just trying to catch up to you. If we can't match you without gimmicks, we might as well not be doing this at all. Lee laughs, a flush of pride coming to his cheeks at the compliment even as he effaces, nonsense. Your Kekkei Genkai are not gimmicks, they are gifts. They make you unique. Niji rolls his eyes and scoffs, try feeling unique when living in a gigantic compound full of people who have the same basic skill set and learn all the same basic techniques you do. Suzuki nods and taps at the corner of his right eye, and when your special unique gift is literally copying other people's moves. Lee shakes his head, perhaps I misspoke, the 2 of you truly have a gift for reading every situation in the most cynical and unpleasant way possible. Suzuki elbows Lee's bruise again and snickers, you've been spending too much time with Ino, her smart mouth's starting to rub off on you. Lee softly swats Suzuki back, that is enough of that. Tell me, Suzuki, how is your medical training progressing? Suzuki takes his hand off his spleen, wisps of teal chakra retreating into his palm and up to the center of his forehead. Considering I healed that in record time, I'd say pretty good. Niji lets his hair down and comments, how much training are you actually doing these days? I thought most of a Chunin medic's education just comes through practice in the hospital and the field, unless they're pursuing a specialty. Suzuki can't help the smirk and the urge to lift his chin, yeah, but I'm not most Chunin medics. I'm Tsunade's apprentice, and that means I'm not only expected to learn how to summon and utilize Katsuyu as well as a bunch of other techniques Tsunade herself invented, but also to do original research and work on creative application and adaptation, maybe even invention if it calls for it, of medical techniques to push the field forward. Niji's eyebrows nearly hit the seal on his forehead. I knew her expectations for you were high, but that's a bit much, isn't it? Suzuki shrugs a shoulder, she's the mother of modern medical ninjutsu. I don't think she'd expect me to do anything less than completely outclass her. Lee leans in, eyes bright, as he asks, so what are you considering for your research? Forget considering, I've already gotten started, Suzuki replies, a steely glint in his eyes, I'm researching Juinjutsu. Everyone who uses it keeps its secrets locked down tight, so there's next to no writing on how to unravel it. Getting Sakura back physically is only going to be half the battle. She'll only be free once Orochimaru's brand is off her, and off her for good. Lee drops a hand on Suzuki's shoulder and says, and she will be free. If anyone should be the one to free her, it will be you. Niji has gone quiet, his eyes unfocused as they stare past the hole Suzuki broke in the wall. After a moment, he straightens up and asks in a surprisingly small voice, Suzuki, if you figured this out, would it only apply to Orochimaru's Juinjutsu? Suzuki stares at Niji, his brow furrowed, for a moment before replying, I'm coming after all Juinjutsu. If I find something that works, I'll take the seal off you myself. Niji whips around to look at Suzuki, his eyes wide, you. Why? The main house would if they found out you even knew how they'd. Suzuki cuts him off with the simple statement, I don't give a fuck. You deserve to be free. Niji holds Suzuki's gaze for several breaths, only breaking eye contact to rub at his eyes, I think. I'm starting to understand why Hinata speaks so highly of you. Suzuki smirks and is in the middle of a smart-ass remark to lighten the mood when the shoji behind them slams open. All three boys whirl around to see Hakume Hyuga looming above them. Her hair and the bandages that usually cover her seal are loose, her white lab coat is missing, and she's staring past them at the gigantic hole in the compound wall with a blank expression. Her left eye twitches, once, twice. Then the veins around her eyes all bulge out at once and she glares bloody murder down at the trio of terrified Chunin. "Clean this up right now and I'll consider keeping this to myself," Hakume growls, "though I'm damn sure Guy and Tsunade would be very interested in how your latest sparring session went." The boys have leapt from the porch and are scrambling to collect all the salvageable pieces of stone before she's even finished. Check the description for the links to the author.